Good evening. I would like to call the Select Board meeting for Monday, February 10th, 2025 to order, and note that we will be going into executive session and not returning before 6 p.m.
Accept a motion, then.
I would accept a motion, Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions and non-union personnel, and the chair has determined that open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Don?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Michael? And I'm an aye, 4-0. Joe? Here, like to call back into order the open session of tonight's Select Board meeting. We left executive session and we took no action. Would everybody like to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We'll start with staff comments and announcements. Do we have any staff here who would like to make any comment or announcement?
Good evening, all. Kevin Considine, Police Chief. I just have two quick announcements. The first, our annual Harwich Police Polar Plunge for this year.
I knew it was coming.
It's that time of
Here
year.
it comes.
I can't wait. Saturday, March 15th at 11 a.m. at Red River Beach. Saturday, March 15th at 11 a.m. Red River Beach. We're looking forward to that. We have another police academy, our newest police academy class coming down from the Falmouth Academy this year, so we're looking forward to that, and anybody from the public that can join us. And even if you don't want to jump in, please join us and support us for this great event. The second one, some of you may know, and most know Katie Varley, my administrative executive assistant. Yesterday was her last day. Katie has been upstairs with the chief's office for nearly 10 years. Before that, we hired her as a police officer. She then went to Brewster PD for a little while, then came back to us as a dispatcher, and then moved upstairs to be in the chief's office. Katie was truly the backbone of our department. I mean, any question that you needed answered, you go to Katie. She's just a great human being, and she's going to be missed. She's not going far. She's going to the Massachusetts Police Training Council to continue to work in the police field in Falmouth. But I just wanted to publicly acknowledge her and thank her for all of her time for the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a polar plunge in August? Do you have one of those in August by any chance, or is it always in March?
If we can find ice cubes, I can arrange it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the staff make a public comment? All right, hearing none, let's move to our weekly briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to you and the members and everybody here and at home.
I thought members of the public were allowed to speak.
Not yet. The next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, relating to the Phase 3 wastewater sewer extension project, this is, as you know, focused in East Harwich. Robert B. Hour is still working on their 2 West contract. And so at present, they are still working now on the Elm Drive on the north side for that, and their 2-week look ahead generally, again, keeps them in Chestnut Lane, Elm Drive, and Martha Eaton Court. And again, the reminder for next week's look ahead is that despite the fact that it's a holiday, the contract has Robert B. Hour working, so there will be work in that area on Monday the 17th, which is the federal holiday. That is my weekly briefing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. And now we'll move to public comment and announcements. So anyone from the public, please. Please.
Thank you so much for taking my comments. My name is Anne Frechette, and I am representing the Great Sands Lakes Association in
And
East
let me
Harwich.
stop you real quick. This is an agenda item, so I would respectfully ask you to defer until the agenda item as it's in our policies.
I see. My understanding, though, was that you had told me that I could not present during the agenda item, which is, and I like, we just had this email exchange. I emailed back and said I'd like to present during the public comment period then, so.
I didn't see your second email.
Okay,
I saw your first email, and in that email, I mentioned to you that because your slides didn't make the agenda packet for the whole public to have available to them, that you could, if I remember right, I said you could present, but just not the slide presentation because it's not in our packet.
could I present the verbal comments then, in case things get?
100%. I said
Okay.
that in my email.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Then I'd like to speak about financing the construction of sewers along Queen Anne Road, which has been designated as Phase 3A of the sewer construction project. And I'd just like to outline right now why this is a really important time and an important project, and to call on the Select Board and Town Administration to take appropriate steps toward financing that project. So first of all, why is this project important? To protect the water quality in the Great Sand Lakes, which include Bucks Pond, John Joseph Pond, Kitty Pond, and Sand Lake. Bucks Pond has seen repeated cyanobacteria blooms, the most recent being October 2024, which lasted more than a month. Amy Usasky had to close the whole area and public access to it. So we call on the Select Board to take the water quality of the Great Sand Lake seriously. The second reason is that the drinking water wells for the town of Harwich are directly south of the Great Sand Lakes. So water, as you know, in that area flows from north to south. So all of the nutrient overloading and cyanobacteria problems that we're seeing right now in Bucks Pond and in John Joseph Pond have a very real possibility of getting to the drinking water wells. The third reason is that there is wastewater flow to the Chatham treatment plant that Harwich is already paying for but underusing. So in one of the GHD presentations, it shows that the Great Sand Lakes neighborhood, the Queen Anne Road sewering, was slotted to take up the access flow that we're already paying for. So taxpayers are already paying for flow that's unused, and the construction of that sewer line will help to actually get what we're paying for in adding more wastewater flow. A related reason is that when the CWMP was originally, the Comprehensive Wastewater Treatment Plan was originally put together, the Great Sand Lakes neighborhood was in Phase 8. And in the CWMP it says, and we will think about the possibility of maybe doing some alum treatments. I have the exact words in the slide presentation, but I'm just gonna have to paraphrase here. Alum treatments are just not effective. I mean, we've seen that in Hinckley's Pond, which was treated with an alum treatment and then saw cyanobacteria bloom this past December when the water column changed over. Cliff Pond is a classic example. It was treated with alum and has had repeated cyanobacteria issues since the treatment. So in the revised 2023 GHD presentation, the Great Sand Lakes neighborhood was bumped up to sometime around 2026 into what's now called Phase 3A. So that I believe the town has recognized the importance of looking at this problem of nutrient overloading and solving it through the extension of the sewering project. Recently, the state revolving fund allocated $31.13 million for financial assistance to Harwich to do the Queen Anne Road sewer extension. It takes the town to put together an appropriations budget to accept the state revolving fund monies. I have put together my own town warrant petition, citizens petition, to ask the town to accept those monies so that we can construct the Queen Anne Road sewer extension. If the town's appropriation budget does what it needs to do, then I'm happy to withdraw the petition, but we're going to go ahead and submit that petition for the February 14th deadline, so that we have something out there, let's just say. So finally, I just want to point out that Massachusetts statutes for surface water quality standards say explicitly that existing uses must under all circumstances be protected. So here's a circumstance where we have the opportunity to protect surface water standards and meet the state statutes that govern this. And I really do want to just point out that, yes, there is so much reorganization and defunding going on at the federal level, but what I'm talking about here is a state statute that is enforceable through state courts. So it has absolutely nothing to do with whatever happens with the federal level. It is still something that can be enforced at the state level. So I call on the town and the Board of Selectmen and the Select Board to take this very seriously and present a warrant article that does what it needs to do for the Great Sand Lakes neighborhood. So thank you very much for listening to my comments.
Thank you for being here. Anybody else for public comment? Hearing none, we will move to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve the Select Board meeting minutes from January 27, 2025,
Second.
as
Move-
written.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? 5-0, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to our next agenda item, we will call the joint meeting with the Select Board and the Finance Committee. So come on up.
But it's season, I'm wearing green. Not for Christmas.
I picked this out before the game.
What's that?
I picked this out before the game.
So what can I say? This must be Mr. Spellman. Yes, it's on you, so you.
Good evening.
We have a joint meeting, we're posted, so I will call the Finance Committee to order for this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Well, thanks for being here, and I think what I'd like to do, Peter, if I could, you've made just a couple of, well, I'm going to ask to clean up a couple house cleaning issues. You have requested a couple of specific things that you would like to proceed with, and it's not really for me to unilaterally determine whether or not those are appropriate. So we'll bring them before the board can weigh in, and we can see where they all land. So the first one that I'll bring forward is the Finance Committee, if I remember right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're asking to hold your own meetings with department heads, or a meeting with department head, in the absence of our typical Saturday meeting. Did I summarize that accurately?
Except I don't think we usually ask to do that. Finance Committee usually just does its own thing, if you will. We have historically done the Saturday meeting, we got most departments in, but then the Finance Committee sets its own schedule for other folks that we need to come in and see us, what, on a warrant article, budget, whatever. So,
The reason I ask is you wrote, do I have any objections to that request in your email? So I assume that there was something that you were asking of myself.
I only know your plan so far is to have a follow-on meeting next Monday, to have police, fire, DPW, and I think some enhancement of service folks come in, right?
That's correct.
We'll hear that jointly in a joint meeting, right?
Yes.
And then, as I understand it, you're not able to get your team together on Saturday anytime soon to do that. I can't tell you if we could get ours together either, but I can tell you that our next meeting, we'll figure out a schedule and invite the folks in we need. Like, we have to see the water department,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
That kind of thing, so.
Okay. So I'll go down the list, the line here with the board. How does the board feel about that? I'm just trying to get the temperature. Pete?
About the board meeting with our department heads?
Sure.
I personally don't have an issue with it.
Okay. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, not only do I not have an issue with it, but by both the charter and state law, they're given the authority to delve into the finances of the town in order to give recommendations to town meeting, and they have always had an absolute right to ask relevant questions about finances to the department heads.
Julie?
I have no problem with it. I would just ask that after we have the meetings with the fire and police and whoever else we're having in, that, you know, if there's no follow-up questions, that they're not being asked to come in on a weekend thing, because that meeting that we normally have was a Saturday all-day kind of thing. So if they're just gonna be going to one of your regular meetings, I wouldn't have an issue.
I'm actually hoping, this is just me talking, that we can, now let's pretend we have 6 meetings that we need. I don't know, there might be one. If we can move that time so it's more like 4:30, 5 o'clock at the end of the workday, where one, you know, a department head could just come in and finish it, you know, that kind of thing. We're gonna try and make it as convenient as possible for anyone we wanna talk to. And also, as you guys had trouble getting a quorum on certain days, it gets to be problematic for us to get a quorum. So I mean, you know,
Michael?
struggle.
I don't have a problem with it. I guess I would defer to the town administrator, though. These are employees of the town and controlled by contract by the town administrator. So I don't believe you have the right to direct them to come in on a Saturday. So I'd hope that you would ask them and that it would be a
I
voluntary
don't
situation.
even know if we're gonna do a Saturday, but we would invite them.
Yeah.
It'll be an invitation only, and we would, quite frankly, ask them to pick their slots if they, what works for you, if we decide to do it that way. That's all. But we don't usually have a separate Saturday meeting from the Board of Selectmen. The Saturday meeting has always been a joint thing, so,
Understood.
yeah.
So unless you want to weigh in on anything, or?
I just have a question. Did I hear that next Tuesday's meeting is meant to be joint?
Next Tuesday meeting, in my mind, was not meant to be joint.
That's not the email that I got.
Okay.
Now, we can just show up if that's. 'Cause
Yes,
we
you
wanna hear-
can.
We want to hear the same information.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's already, well, I don't know, I think it's been posted as a joint meeting.
Okay. Is there a problem with it being a joint meeting?
Not at all.
Great.
To weigh in, I would recommend it.
Yes.
Post.
Perfect. Yeah.
Post.
The second one was the, you had mentioned a date of February 27th to hold your public hearing,
Yes.
and we have until the 4th Tuesday of the month,
24th.
which is the 24th. So,
You will give us a budget that day or night,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and we will conduct that hearing. Now, the charter says we have to do one hearing or as many as we need, but at least one. The 27th will satisfy that initial hearing or hearing.
and that's a 14-day post?
Huh?
That's a 14-day post.
Yeah, the material's already been in and advertised it, so it should be advertised this week.
I just want to make sure that we get that posted.
I don't know if I'm being asked or told, but I can check with staff to make sure that
Thank
that's
you.
the case.
Excellent.
Supposed to be posted or advertised in the Chronicle on Wednesday and Wednesday,
What time do you have for the hearing on the
6
27th?
o'clock.
6 PM?
Yeah.
Here. Small conference, thank you.
Expect a big audience, do you, over there?
You never know, but in the last 3 years, we've had nobody, so
Right. Okay.
it would be nice if we had folks. And
absolutely.
by the way, folks can call in, so I mean, if they want to, or just listen, so.
Okay. Well, that's all I had for the housekeeping. So, Joe, if you want to take it from here, that would be great.
Certainly. Good evening, everybody, and I think it was already mentioned, but I'll put it on the record. To my left is my colleague Ed Spellman. Ed, as you know, is our interim finance director / town accountant. And Ed and I are prepared to go through all of the documents, that you've received in the packet. Hopefully, everybody has all of the same material. I believe there was one addition, and I'll put right out there that neither Ed nor I can bear any responsibility for the size of the print. But the last item that was added is referred to as the legal debt margin. And I think Ed will be speaking to that, but that is part of our discussion on debt service, statement of indebtedness, and debt legal margin. It's also referred to, it was page 116 of a prior year's annual comprehensive financial report. So we'll be referring to that, and we'll be referring to that as it falls under, I believe, the fiscal year 2026. First, you have the draft department operating budgets as well as Appendix B. And then behind that, we have the appropriate munis reports. First deck, if you will. And then separate from that is a document that says fiscal year 2026 debt overview, and that's the one that talks about statement of indebtedness, debt service detail, and legal debt limit itself. Does it sound like everybody has those? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So then, Mr. Chairman, plural, I'd first draw your attention to the document that says Draft Department Operating Budgets, Appendix B. I think with one or two minor exceptions is substantially what I was speaking to last week on February 3rd with my budget message, and that was contained in your packet. Specifically, I'd like to identify in the document known as Appendix B, if you look on page 4. So what has changed in that regard is line 156. So the group health insurance number, that now reflects what was voted last week by the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group, of which we, the town of Harwich, as well as our friends at Monomoy Regional, are members. So mercifully, that number went from 10% down to 6.5. So what that figure represents is the town's share, 75%. Our benefit right now for employees is the town pays 75% for health insurance costs, the employees bear 25%, and so with a 6% increase year over year, you can see the delta and the dollar amount in the packet there. So what that does then, it brings us to a new Appendix B number, draft for fiscal year 2026. And again, just as a reminder, as you all know, this is really what Article 4 gets to in our warrant, is the operating budget and other costs. So that bottom line number that we're looking at for fiscal year 2026 is $47,635,469, or what is presently showing as a 4.2% increase year over year for Article 4. Then, Mr. Chairman, what you have, I think, is a 22-page report. As we talked about last year at that said Saturday meeting, it isn't pretty, but it's, I think, informative. But what this is it's the fiscal year 2026 operating budgets for each of the departments. So an example would be, if you look at Appendix B, if you look at line number 1, Department 114, that covers our town moderator. So the department, you can see on page 1, is 01114, 01141, and then 01141. That's getting to salaries and wages for moderator, et cetera, and so on. So you'll see that it should match up, generally speaking, from the Appendix B, which will be in the warrant, to the budget report, which is in front of you tonight. As I've said last week, at present, there is a wage adjustment figure of 2% that was factored into Appendix B. You'll find that again on page 3, and that is line 151. The wage adjustment is incorporated into the bottom line number on 151. Finance and accounting have not yet had the opportunity to cascade those adjustments into the departments. So right now, you won't see Appendix B showing, Appendix B or the Munis report showing the net effect of the wage adjustment. That'll be a future report, and that's simply because Ed and Megan were spending all of their time getting this material together. So we'll be working on that next.
Excuse me, Joe,
Sure.
excuse me, is the 2% factored though into this draft summary budget?
Yes, again, the 2% wage adjustment is in the Appendix B, line 151, all the way over to the right.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield there for right now because this is meant to initiate discussion between your two boards on what you can see is baked within those materials. And again, really nothing substantially changing other than what I've just referenced from what I talked about last week.
Thank you, Joe, and I'll go to our board first and then over to you all. Pete, you have anything?
Not at this time, no. Thank you.
Don?
Julie?
I don't either,
Michael? And I have nothing. Mr. Chair?
I'll just point out, I guess the elephant in the room. We started to talk at one point before, and it has to do with 204 Sisson Road. You and I have had discussions about this. If you recall, back in June, it was the 24th, the meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee presented the topic of doing a 5-year look at the 204 financially, to put a bow around it and wrap up where we were. We submitted a report in August of this year. We have heard nothing since, okay? We have also told you or informed you that, in our opinion, 204, the building, should be a budget, not just not the cultural center director, but the building itself. When we looked back and got data, and by the way, the data we got financially was through you, Mr. Chairman, to the different entities, primarily the finance director at the time. There were some holes in the data. There were at least 4 years when we went back and looked where there were no electric bills, there were no gas bills, there were no telephone bills that are indicated as being paid from that revolving fund. I don't think that's something that's acceptable. I think we should understand where that information is and why it might have been credited to something else. We, in our recommendations going forward, looking to move those expense items, because a revolving fund is meant to fund fluctuating events as far as cash flow goes, things that are project and activity specific, not a building. So we have not heard from you on this. We recently, as of this afternoon, got an opinion from DOR that says those expenses are not allowed in an expense account. In a revolving account. So I'll leave you with that, okay? We expect to see the numbers cleaned up, get a full accounting of what we paid for all that time in this building by specific item, and to correct the accounting that we're using for that building. If you recall, well over 90% of what goes on in that building is funded, if you will, by the rents for the studios. There is a sufficient track record of consistency, and if I understand right, those units are rented under a contract or a rental agreement. So it's not something that fluctuates. 1 month we have 2 rented, 1 month we have 4 rented, etc. And if I also understand correctly, we are fully booked and have a waiting list. I may be wrong. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this up tonight, and you and I have had the conversation multiple times. And I think my last comment to you was, this is exactly where I want this to be discussed, tonight, right now.
You have it.
Yes. So I will go to the board to see, I have my opinions on it, but some of your question about 4 years, the holes in the bills, missing gas and electric payments, if those were 4 years back, that was before my time. So I'd like to hear.
Well, I'm not blaming anybody.
No blame taken. I also would like to find out, my point is, I'd also like to find out if there's missing information, where that
My concern is, we roll a number every year that says, okay, at the end of the year, here's the balance, and we roll what's left into the next year, into the next year, and the next year. Mm-hmm. If you speculate on the numbers, you could end up in a situation where you're actually running a deficit on that revolving account during that period of time. I don't know. Mm-hmm. In our report, we made some guesstimates based on what the trends look like and identified that information in the report. And again, It's been 5 months, we haven't heard anything.
Well, I think the board replied to you all and said, we have your report, and thank you for doing the report. I don't think anything more came of it, and I'd agree with you on that. So I'll put it to the board. Does anyone on the board want to begin this topic?
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I'm happy to ask the why, as to why is it set up the way in which it is today? I guess, you know, the Finance Committee believes it should be in the operating budget. Why historically has it not been in there? I don't know if you want to go to the town administrator or the finance director, or?
Yeah, I will go to the TA on the why.
It's been my statement since I've been here that that's a policy matter for the select board. Various boards as constituted previously, I believe I've discussed that and have opted to continue with the revolving fund mechanism that's there. You know, looking at Appendix B, I think that there's some comparisons. You can see on page 2, you know, Department 180, 181, 191. These are Albro House, Old Rec Building, Public Building Repairs. Not to go too far afield, Ed can rescue me if I go too deep, but those department numbers are related back to general government. So that's where that falls as far as your expenditures go. So I think in theory, there could be added in munis, say a Department 184 or a 185, and it could be 204 Sisson Road. There could also be a 186 Town Hall or any of the other buildings, but it's been a policy matter from my perspective that we haven't changed. I would hope out of this presentation tonight and as a discussion tonight going forward, that the board consider those matters and give guidance on that. It's, with all due respect to CPAs, it's merely accounting, and I'm sure we can accommodate that. What you'll miss is any prior year's comparisons to start. And then, last but not least, I don't know entirely what was just said regarding Department of Revenue. I look forward to getting that information, and I know that the finance director and I and council will have to respond to that if need be, but I'm not really sure what was not allowed.
The chairman has the
Well,
email.
if I could, I'm not looking for a back and forth
Yep.
and through you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Right now, I just remind the board that you've had auditors that are recognized by the Commonwealth auditing those funds. So with regard to where 204 Sisson Road as a public building should appear, is a policy directive from the select board. And we can certainly achieve that in administration and finance.
So with that understanding, you know, it'd be my preference to see it as part of the operating budget, but I'd love to hear from some of the other board members as to their thoughts and opinions, and clearly some of you folks have been around a little bit longer while this has been in play, so love to hear the thought process.
Okay, I'm gonna skip around a little, Julie.
So I just go back to the email, I think, from August. I remember getting the report. It was a great report. And I remember commenting back and saying that we also look forward to other buildings in town being assessed in a similar manner because we have other buildings, and it seems we constantly focus on 204. I'm happy for any discussion that we want to have in terms of whether or not we're going to change how we're funding in this building, but I also recall that utility question coming up before. And I thought, and I could be wrong, but I thought the utility question that came up before was because the utilities were handled by, and this is where I could be completely off mark, DPW. It wasn't, for instance, it's not Kara paying the electric bill and the gas bill, et cetera, at 204 Sisson. So where does that fall in that fund? If there's not something accounted for in there, then sure, we should look at that. And if we're going to look at it on a larger scale and how we're going to change things, I'm open for that discussion, but I would say we have other buildings in town that we should also be analyzing in the same manner, if we're going to focus on one.
And by the way, we're not looking and asking to look at other buildings. It wasn't our intent to do a study.
I know,
that
that's why
says
I'm
every
pointing
building,
that
the
out.
profit and the loss or whatever. That's not the intent. The intent started out being, let's just, because people react about 204, let's put a bow around 204 and memorialize what it is. Well,
Well, there seems to be a
and
dedicated.
so one of the things you have to ask is, why is it different than the community center?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is we seem to spend a lot of time on assessing that building, and I'm just saying we have other buildings in town. So I'm open to any discussion on it. That's just one of the points I'd like to make.
Don?
Counterpoint. I want to say from the get-go here that don't conflate whether or not we're supporting the artists in the building with the mechanism for accounting for the financing of it, because I know I'm not, and I'm pretty sure you folks on your committee aren't either. That having been said, I've been clear for like 8 years or 7 years sitting here that I'm no big fan of revolving funds. It actually disturbs me to see a government that maybe run eventually on all revolving funds everywhere, so nobody gets a deep dive into anything. It's just, does it break even? That's great. There isn't any difference between the community center on the bare bones stuff, what it costs to light it up, what it costs to heat it, what it costs to plow it, maintain it. And only revolving fund costs that are recognized are within programs that are in there. For the life of me, I don't understand why there's this horrible resistance, because the taxpayers, we're a line item budget community in this state. The taxpayers get the right to see how things are going. And why it is we keep insisting on dying on this hill that it's got to remain to be a revolving fund. I mean, I'm kind of where Pete is. I'd like to see what it looks like. And Joe's right. I mean, this has been a policy thought from the board. It's not something the administration just thought up. We did this. There's absolutely no reason why at least a portion of that building shouldn't be reflected in a regular budget item in the budget book as an appropriation with direct funds going to it. It's more clear, it's more forthcoming, and it's not going to change who's in the building. That's a whole different story. But from where I'm sitting here, I don't like any of these revolving funds. You can audit them all you want, but it doesn't tell you specifically on a line item basis, was this appropriate for this thing the town meeting voted for when they approved the budget? You can't get to that level with the revolving funds. You only get generic purpose reviews, and if there's something like baseball bats, then sure, rec must be using them, and that's fine. I don't know what the purpose is, and I don't know whether it's programmatically consistent with what we approved here or a town meeting did. The only way to get to that is by making it part of the regular budget. So I've been there for 8 years. I'm not changing my mind.
Thank you, Don. Michael?
I'm willing to do anything, including having Don pay the utilities out of his own checkbook, to get the finance committee to stop talking about 204 Sisson Road. It's interesting that town meeting, year after year after year, supports the initiatives inside of that, but the finance committee won't let it go. Now, just for clarification purposes, Peter, I think you mentioned in your opening statement that the utilities and whatnot weren't being paid out of the revolving fund.
No, I said there's a period of time in the data we were given, 5-year period of time over the 8+ years, whatever, where there was no information that said those were paid from the revolving fund, not from one of the DPW paid for them or somebody else paid for them. They must have been paid for because the building was operating. It just doesn't show up.
Right, so my point is there a time that the utilities were being paid for out of the revolving fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last couple of
So,
years.
With that said, I'd love to see it on paper what it would actually look like, and have no problem with the expenses being paid out of there to a previous statement. And I do find it funny that this is the only building that several members of the finance committee are solely focused on. Not Brooks Academy, not the old rec building, not any other building. And if we're gonna scrutinize this one, we really should look at the rest of them.
Oh.
Whether it's a joint effort or not, you guys seem to dive deeper into the reports, so maybe you do an assessment on all of our buildings.
If you want us to do that, that's something we could entertain. But I would just say, I was one initiated when we came here on the 24th of June. I don't think you were here, Michael. You could check the minutes. And talked about trying to wrap this thing up, decided to summarize it for exactly that purpose that people keep talking about it, right? And said that we wanted to do this, and every one of you did this, right? And we went and did it, and we got the information. We didn't go ask anybody for information other than we asked Jeff, give us this, give us that, give us that. And, you know, he got most of his information through the finance director at that time, and some information from Kara, right? And and I don't know who else, but anyhow, we put it together, and there's the document. And I'm just saying, there's some holes in it. And, you know, if you're gonna go change this into the budget. There's gonna have to be some reconciliation of the revolving account as it exists. And you gotta get to a point where going forward, the revolving account is probably focused, I would suggest, on just program-specific stuff or activities. That includes part-time, like someone has to be in the building or clean up after the gym or something like that. Those things directly related to that would be in that, or accommodated for in that revolving fund. And we actually, in the report, when you read through the recommendations, you get all done, we get down to, we said, okay, let's start out, let's make it $20,000. That may not be the right number, but it's not $300,000.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
And to a couple of the points on that, we're looking at the 2026 budget, and if we're gonna ask the interim finance director, because we don't have a finance, to now audit back through as part of this process, I will absolutely not support that right now. Maybe in June or July, when we have somebody in place, we could go back and look at it. But to this board, we've got enough audits going on right now, and enough catch-up that we're trying to do. If you want to see it for 2026 budget, that's great. To the level of detail that you're talking about, DPW, we've been through this. Angela Lamontia, I think you were on the board when we talked about this, and you were a big fan of indirect costs. We don't charge the rec department for the beach raking. We don't charge for Brooks Park being mowed. There's a lot of indirect costs that DPW do that we don't back bill to different departments. Is that the level that you're looking for? Do we do janitor
No,
services
just-
for each building?
The only thing you're looking for is make it the same as the community center. The
So
community,
just that building?
huh?
Just that building? You want us to mirror the community center?
I think so, unless there's some exception there that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
I mean, what do you got? You got gas, electric, you got telephone, you probably have supplies, which, by the way, I think are in Kara's budget anyhow.
That's different, though, than the maintenance and the indirect costs. And I'm asking you, are you looking to get what it costs to mow the lawn? Are you looking to get, what are you looking to get?
Well, I don't wanna know what the DPW is doing there. I wanna know, my suggestion, things that are paid for, if that was a business, a cost center, basically, the building, I would say whatever they have to pay out is what you're looking for.
Okay,
That's all.
thank you.
I'm not looking for interdepartmental. We'll go crazy if we try and do that.
Thank you.
Figure out how much the DPW might spend cutting the grass for the cemetery or something. I mean, to me, we don't need that.
Thank you.
Not what I'm looking for.
Any other board member? I think that was helpful in order to drill down on exactly what you all think should be included in the budget versus in the revolving fund. So if this is a policy change, it seemed to me, what I heard from this board was that this board would entertain a change in policy. Is that what I heard? Is that the consensus? Yeah, Don? Sorry, no, Don. You guys look alike.
Okay. You need glasses. In any event, I tend to agree with Michael if that's going to wind up being the goal. I mean, if we're not going to do indirect transfers, because I think Larry went down that road with us, did somebody come into the 204 and change light bulbs, and what does that cost for allocated expense? As long as we have some sort of goal that we're going to get off the drug of these revolving funds, most of the government should operate on direct appropriations, and some of this has to do with things like the activities in the community center. Those can stay as revolving funds without changing the building or without evicting anybody. Again, I go back to what I originally said. There's nothing in what I'm saying that has any implication at all to the artists or the people who are there. This has everything to do with just, what does it cost to operate the building? And we should just plug that into the budget somewhere along with every other budget item, because I'm sure that it costs money to light and heat this building. We got that factored in. We got it factored in almost every other building. So why is this the outlier?
Richard?
It's not on this topic, it's just on the budget in general. If it's too soon, I'm happy to do it. Oh, Mr. Spellman and Mr. Powers are here. Thank you for restoring the $400,000 for the overlay budget for the expense. The only question I have.
State your name if you don't mind.
I'm sorry,
We
Richard
all know
Wayne.
you, but just state your name.
Richard Waystack, Harwich. Thank you for restoring that to the $150,000 there. The only question I have is you have a revenue of $400,000 coming out of the overlay surplus. We will not know that number till we get through our abatement period. So in the past, I think last year, a couple of years, we were given 250,000. Last year, we gave 4. We may not be giving 4 this year in the overlay surplus. So I just, as both parties are here, I don't want to have to go to a Saturday meeting or a Friday meeting or whatever, to the finance and to the board, but that's the only number that we will not know for sure for another month or 2. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything?
To the previous speaker, sure.
Please.
We haven't covered that document yet. It's one of the last in the overall packet. It's the sources and uses. However, I would agree with the previous speaker. There are a number of funds that we've forecasted. It doesn't mean that they're going to hold. That's why I give my budget in accordance with the charter in February. You look at it with or without amendment. They do their hearings, and then before the warrant gets set, we finalize the numbers.
Great.
But we'll get into more discussion on sources and uses a little bit later this evening.
Okay, and I think we've talked 204 enough. I heard you loud and clear. I heard my board here loud and clear. I want to make sure you hear this from me, as I'm going to work with Joe tomorrow to see how we can begin moving forward and taking the steps to get those items in the budget. And I will do that tomorrow.
Fabulous.
Thank you. Joe?
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah,
could,
please.
what I think would be very helpful for Mr. Spellman and I is if that's the board's wish, at least you indicate that as unanimous consent or make a motion.
Unanimous consent is what I heard.
Except the time only
Discuss a policy change, I think is
Yeah,
what.
no, and I think I'm comfortable with the unanimous consent right now, because I want to see what it looks like.
Correct.
So, and then-
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's what I'll do. That's what I'll begin tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, we have unanimous consent
To add a department to the budget.
to create,
See what that looks like.
Can we keep talking this out, please? Yep. Better tonight than tomorrow.
yeah, sure,
and
sure.
Be confused. Are you looking, because what I thought I heard was, let's put it into the operating budget.
Right, I think, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I think I want to see what that looks like. What's the impact on the budget you just presented when you do that?
With electric, with gas, with,
Just operating the building.
I think the question
it's operating the
is, yeah,
building,
what
I
are the
think.
costs in the, give us a breakdown of what the operating costs are, and whether or not we then move it out of a revolving fund and putting it into a
Exactly.
budget.
So we're gonna talk in code in front of everybody, but, so I think what we're talking about is, we have the organ object for gas, electric, and other utilities that we can break down for all purposes, and then we'll be able to analyze whether we have that specifically. Because to the overall point, the magic is, all the utility bills come to administration, and we have to process them. So every gas bill, every light bill, every other heating source bill is processed by administration. So what we've been relying upon are the organizational and organ object codes from the other departments. So if that's incorrect, that's just a function of what's been done in the past. It's not a nefarious scheme, and it's certainly not a willful scheme in any way, shape, or form. So if I'm hearing the board correctly, I think we can run those reports generally. I even think I could do it. You can see the look of horror on Mr. Spellman's face. To get that data initially tomorrow, and then we can talk about it.
excellent.
But I wanted to make that clear. If we're looking for operational costs such as utilities for buildings, we know how we've got that coded. We can run that. And then I can meet with other departments, and especially DPW, to see if there aren't other costs that I've missed.
Don, did you have something?
Yeah, his last comment basically touched on that, but somebody's paying this stuff. I mean, because we're not getting our power turned off. We're not getting overdue notices. Somebody's paying something somewhere. It's just properly allocating this stuff so you can see where it is. You pull it out where it was.
Except the revolving.
Except
fund
for the
balance.
revolving fund, which I am not in favor of at all.
I know, but the revolving fund balances rolling forward year after year are impacted by that, and they should have been charged that revolving fund. My suggestion on, if I could, on the list that you would have, when we were given information about the revolving fund expenses for years, they were itemized. I mean, there was 10 things on there. Comcast, Verizon, Water Department, electric, gas, I mean, it's right there. So whatever that list is what you want to use, I think.
Please.
Trying to get to the point of where both of these bookends are here. I don't know that I'm particularly interested in pulling apart this year's budget within a few weeks and reconstituting it, but I'm all in on changing how we operate it as the future goes on. So I'd really like to see what this thing looks like in front of us to be able to pull off something, because in order to get to where you're talking about, Peter, you'd also have to recognize somewhere in the budget some funds that were realized, if we're going to put it in the real budget. So you have to allocate
Absolutely.
those things towards that, which is not a small endeavor. Well, we're in the middle of all kinds of other stuff right now rolling in towards town meeting for this year.
I apologize for you being busy, but
I get it, but I'm all for when you're running, as Joe talks about, an 80-something million corporation, I'm all for doing this in a kind of coherent way when we have time to do it, and not just rushing to pull everything apart and put it back together. If we could get to a policy statement that says that's the way we're going to be doing this in the future, I'd be a lot happier.
We'll get to work on that tomorrow.
I said do your best. I don't know.
Pete?
And I just want to clarify, because I'm not sure the lift is that great, but perhaps I'm wrong. You mentioned, Joe, sorry, through
Please.
you to the town administrator, creating a department. That department already exists in your budget, correct?
No. If I may, Appendix B, if you look at,
You got a director of cultural affairs, I think, in there.
Yeah.
And expenses associated with her.
Right, 698, Department
thank you,
698. right?
sorry.
Page 4.
Thank you. Like I was going to say, Department 698, page 4, Cultural Affairs, salaries and wages of the director and expenses related to the director and the programming. That is not the same as a budget for the building. There are other programs that operate in that building that are not just capital, such as recreation, and there are some that are through administration, specifically the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. So what you see on page 4 is programming for cultural affairs. Put it out there. That's why I've been saying the whole time I've been here, when we've been talking about it, there's a building that has an address. I refer to that building by that address. Not a cultural center, because you won't find a cultural center in our budget. You'll find cultural affairs. What you will find in the revolving funds is now a revolving fund that talks about the building, where my predecessor and others had used a reference to a building that did not exist. There is no cultural center per se for the town of Harwich, other than there is 204 Sisson Road, which is the predominant house for cultural affairs programming.
So what department do you need to create?
So if I hear the commentary correctly, that's why I want you to see on page 1 of the Appendix B, sorry, page 2. There are existing departments that are expense level only. For example, Department 180, Albro House, expenses. Now, there's a Albro House revolving fund, separate and distinct. 181, the old rec building, expenses only, separate and distinct from, there was someone here earlier from the trust. And then the one that I've focused on, public building repairs, $2,000, as sort of a catch-all. So that's what I was getting to. Now, to go back to the code that we were talking about. Department, or any of the 100 series departments, is because when Ed and I need to report back to the Department of Revenue, that is what they recognize universally as general government. Right away, you can see that Cultural Affairs Department is under Department 600. And for the Commonwealth, that's culture and recreation. And so that's where that becomes something for us. So a building is general government. A program may either be general government, public safety, et cetera.
Okay, so if I could continue, Mr. Chair. So essentially, you're looking to create Department 184, which would be the 204 Sisson Road building.
If I
And,
could,
real quick, and you can expand.
Yep.
Because what you're telling me is the expenses in 181 and 183 are the items that the FinCom's talking about. The lights, the heat, cell phone, cable, whatever. That's what's within those numbers there?
no,
No.
and I apologize first, and not to be, I'm not looking to do anything other than what this shows right now. Because for 6 years, I can speak to every line in this, and I can speak to every line in Munis, and I can speak to every line in the revolving funds. But if the executive office of the town, listening to the agents of town meeting, you're elected, they're appointed, but you're two branches of government. If you want that level of detail, we can do that. It's a rather straightforward exercise. But to the exercise about gas, electric, water, alarm, cable, and/or internet, I would argue right now that we don't necessarily capture that everywhere. And that's not meant as an aha moment. That's meant as what our accounting department has been using in Munis and how we've been coding it. So for me, as a government geek, this is a great conversation. Because what you're talking about is something that I heard 37 years ago as a young school committee member about program-based budgeting versus, as previous speaker had said, line item-based budgeting. And it really just comes down to what do we capture and how can we parse it, because it's all data. And so, sorry, you're with me on this one. As geeks, that's where we get into, the data. So the exercise is fairly straightforward. I think the comment was it's not a heavy lift. I would agree with that. It's keystrokes and a Boolean search and a database. Pretty straightforward. The trick is, has every department, when submitting materials for coding, done the proper coding? And then last but not least, if I could while we're on this, I also know that when you're talking about the building formerly known as the Cultural Center, that before I got here, there was a capital report that had capital items for that, revolving fund items, and on the capital plan, there was a subsidy, a straight-up dollar amount that went to the building. During my tenure, we've talked about that at meetings like this, at town meeting, everywhere. Do we really want that subsidy to be there? Because that's a missing link. That's not really reflective of where we're at. So that's sort of, excuse me for a second. The excitement takes my saliva away. There we go. We've had these conversations. So to wrap it all up, if you want a department, it's probably going to come in 100 series because it's general government. It's not specific programming as the Commonwealth wants it. And all of this, no matter what we may think of the capital city and what goes on there, all of this is derived locally. That ties back to the mothership, the Department of Revenue, and the Division of Local Services. So we can absolutely run the report that says, hey, for gas, electric, water, alarms, security, cable, internet, and I'm probably sure we'll think of a few more, we can run those and we can start parsing that and show you that. No, it doesn't interrupt, sorry, it interrupts, but it's not, shouldn't be injurious to the overall process. Unless, as we talk more about tonight's meeting and town meeting and everything else, you ask for more asks. So it's then just prioritizing. So that's really what, I'm not looking for any change. I'm prepared to respond to change. We can modify Appendix B. We'll throw that in the explanation for Article 4. We can, under the articles that are already being contemplated, sorry, they're already contemplated, they're already written by me, we can talk about the spending caps in the revolving fund. We do that every year. But we can also have an article that reduces the allocations of the purpose for the revolving funds. We've done that in other years. So from a staff perspective, and I don't mean to say that that's all I do, I I know I embody the third branch of government in our charter, where we have a select board, town meeting, town administrative form of government. But that's part of my role as administrator, building your budget. So that's why I say tonight, that this is excellent. I really mean that for my purposes. We got a almost packed room. We've got people staring at me, so they may know what I'm saying. And you can talk about policy as it relates to what these folks want to get in front of town meeting. However, the understanding will be, from my perspective, that we all understand that whether you're town meeting, select board executive, or administration, we all have the same goal. Helping our taxpayers and voters understand what we're asking them for and understand what they're giving us. We're all trying to get to an informed town meeting on May 5th.
Thank you, Joe. Anything else, Pete?
I hate to continue, but yes, if I could. So, my only confusion, I don't mean to be contentious on this, but if I go to page 7 of the Munis report, it looks to me as if those line items, 180, 181, are those expenses.
Sorry, thank you. For Albro House, yes. For Old Rec, yes. For a public building repair, no.
Right.
And I think, if I may, I apologize,
Oh,
sorry, Mr.
please.
Chairman, through you. I think what we'll discover is when we run these reports, they're gonna start tying to some of these, but not completely.
Yeah.
So I've said it before, and I'll put it out there tonight, and not to get too much into capital, but I see the chair has joined us, which I think is a great thing. I've said before, if you want to have a department, and tell me if I'm wrong, it might be general government, that is utilities, which would be gas or whatever we describe as utilities, so that everybody can see it on this, in the same book, on the same page at the same time. Without making promises that the accounting department couldn't necessarily keep because they're governed by the UMass accounting, Universal Massachusetts Accounting System. That's UMass, which derives what we put into Munis. But that's great commentary. I want to know that number as well as anybody. What does it take to heat the buildings? Because clearly tonight, we're not paying enough. And things of that nature.
And I don't disagree with having that conversation, and I think when we get our long-term finance director on board, we can travel down that road. But, yeah, I think looking at this and the overall scope of this, I'm not, I don't think it is a huge lift, so I think we can see what this looks like and decide. Looking at some of these other numbers, it doesn't look like it's even going to add up to be a ton of money. I'm not sure what the history
It
has
looks like
shown.
about $185,000 when you get done, sort of.
Okay, so anyway, I'm finally done. I can be quiet for a little bit.
Anyone else? Michael, Julie? Okay. So the takeaway for me is you're going to work on putting together some information that I can share with the board, and then we'll have more conversation about
Absolutely.
this particular item.
And for the record, Mr. Chairman, you may have noticed I looked to my left, and what I asked under my breath was, anything I need to correct? And I think the answer was, no, we can do this reporting. Did I
Great.
capture that?
Correct.
There we go.
Thank you. I guess you can continue.
Any other questions on the operating budget? Otherwise, we'll get into debt.
Yes.
Uh,
May I speak from here?
Nope. But it was worth a try asking, I guess.
Just wanted to go, I'm Scott Norum. I'm on the Finance Committee. I can say that tonight, right?
Yes, you
That was
can.
Last week. The comment about the wage budget for 2026, you said that it's on line 151. You mean it's already included in the total, but it's not been distributed to the individual departments? That's why we see things like a negative rate of increase for the building department, or less than 1% for big departments like fire or
Correct.
police. Is it in the administration line, line 29? Is that how you make the total true without it being fully distributed across the departments? I see there that salaries is
I
going.
believe so, thank you. Sir, if I may, to correct the record. Last week's version, it was simply in 151. We have the approximate calculation, You break into the Excel spreadsheet, you add it. But thank you for the reminder. On page 1 of Appendix B, and I'm going to put it out there, and hopefully there'll be some laughs. Accounting and I thought we could put it in Select Board's budget so that your budget balloons exorbitantly. We thought about putting it into your budget and for
Won't
FinCom,
happen.
but it's already ballooned.
It won't happen.
Shots taken. So I said, let's just put it in with administration, and we know right now that that's what that is. That's a wage adjustment of 2% for personnel in the town.
And that's reasonable in terms of collective bargaining agreements that have been completed lately, and that's the basis of the 2%? It's enough, you
I want to be very clear.
Judgment?
Not at all. That this was not done in any way, shape, or form relative to either past, present, or future collective bargaining negotiations. This is a dollar amount that the board felt was a number that I could sustain, and that's what that is. So I'll put it out there because the town's in negotiations. This is unrelated to any specific negotiations that are occurring.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on that and just ask, we have 7 collective bargaining units
We have 8,
Eight.
and we're in negotiations with all 8.
with all of them. Are they all up like the end of this fiscal
So
year?
all 8 bargaining agreements expire with the fiscal year, and I don't think I'm betraying any secrets. Generally speaking, the town's in negotiations with all 8, and the town's interested in 3-year agreements.
Yeah, okay.
Bob, did you have a question?
I do. It's really a follow-up on what was just asked, I guess,
Right.
and from the Appendix B that was in last week's packet and the Appendix B in today's packet, that's a change. That amount, which I get to be 800 grand, was not in last week's, and essentially one of the only differences other than, and so I understand what it is. The one request that I have relative to it is, as we keep generating, I expect, maybe I'm wrong, keep generating new versions of Appendix B, if we could get communicated in some fashion the changes. Because one of the things that we do is go and put all this into Excel spreadsheets and compare and get variances and all that sort of thing. And that's the only reason that the 800 grand popped out, is that the Appendix B in last Monday's package doesn't add up, doesn't foot by 800 grand. And this week's it does. It would be nice to know, gee, we made this change from week to week, and not have to hunt it down through,
So sort of a red line version of...
yeah, a
of-
red
yeah,
line
okay, great.
version. Through 4
Joe?
line.
If I heard the previous speaker correctly, the dollar amount was in my Appendix B last week, under line 151.
It's in the total, but it's not in that line item, the line item for salaries and wages changes. It didn't print in the Appendix B that I got anyway, so it's not in the salaries and wages total that it is now in this week. So all of a sudden it pops as an $800,000 difference. Anyway, the
Yep.
point is that,
Sorry, yeah, fine.
the point is just that
Retain.
really when there's a change,
Noted.
rather than having us hunt
Okay.
the change,
Highlight
if
it.
we could get a red line
Sure.
version.
Joe?
The dollar amount reference was in Appendix B last week. It was in line 151, the subtotal for departmental budgets. So that number has not changed week over week. We did add it, as I've just admitted and described, in the administration line, so it's further brought out. The next change that I would expect to Appendix B would simply be, once accounting has been able to cascade that 2% generally across the board into those salary and wages. But I want to be clear, we're operating out of Munis, which does not let you code it other than you see in the headers as draft. We're now in a spreadsheet that does not let you craft anything other than a big header and footer that says draft. So versioning this is not what we usually do, because what we're doing tonight is not what we usually do. If you look at the charter, the requirements are that the administrator shall, no later than the second Tuesday in February, present to the select board the budget. So that's what I'm doing tonight, finally and officially, building off of my message from last week. I don't want to give any false hope that we can accomplish the versioning that's asked, but we'll endeavor to make sure we track everything.
Thank you.
Because we're simply using the Munis database, dropping it into an Excel so it can be seen everywhere.
Right.
I just want to try to re-establish expectations.
Sure. Thank you.
My only follow-up comment is that there's no line 151 in last week's Appendix B. I mean, maybe it's hiding somewhere, but it's not between 149 and 152.
Okay, thanks for the note.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Okay, no other questions on, or, no? Okay, Joe?
Debt? You're
Debt?
gonna talk about the
All right,
debt
thank
now?
you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the next packet that you have says fiscal year 2026. It says debt overview. And first, we have the statement of indebtedness. Again, I referred to that last week, and this is a form that is required by the Commonwealth. So Ed and I went through it, and we thought the simplest thing to do was first to show what is currently on record with the Division of Local Services on indebtedness. Ed will walk through that in a moment, but also want to let you know that the next page after that is identified as fiscal year 2026 projected principal and interest payments excluded from Proposition 2.5, also known as the aggregate debt service. And so what I want to draw your attention to is that is what we refer to as the debt service detail. So if you look all the way at the bottom, on the left it says total, on the right it says the $3.43 million. And let me just test it before anyone else does. That $3.43 million figure is what you will also find with some 1 cent or $1 rounding. If you look in Appendix B on line 152, 153, total debt service, principal and interest, that document that I just mentioned is the detail for that. And then, as was said before, it's not going to be in the packet. I apologize for the omission, but also wanted to make sure it was present tonight. It'll be in your packet next week, is that commentary that was called the legal debt limit. So that's the last page. So in between, what we've also shared, after statement of indebtedness and after debt service detail, is the document that, through our finance director a few years ago, was lovingly referred to as sources and uses, which is really just comparing revenues and expenses. Again, this is all meant to tie. There may be some minor rounding. And then beyond that, you can see that we have a budget, for lack of a better word, that ties back to estimated local receipts. And so you can see what we budgeted for fiscal year '24 versus what came in actually, versus what is budgeted presently for '25, and how we're looking in most cases for the 6-month look-in, and then what is now being represented for the budget for fiscal year '26. So again, you'll have statement of indebtedness, debt service detail. After debt service detail is information on sources and uses with a draw out of local receipts. And then we have the legal debt margin. I think for everybody's benefit, I'll turn it over now through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Spellman to talk about the statement of indebtedness.
Thank you, and thank you, Ed.
Thank you. The statement of indebtedness is an annual report that's required to be submitted by all the cities and towns to the Department of Revenue in conjunction with the year-end closing of the town, submittal of the balance sheet, and is part of the process in certifying free cash. And what I can do is just walk you through the statement. The first page is basically, it's a summary of the various categories. On the first line, you'll see building was a outstanding beginning balance of $12,800,000. The second column deals with new issues that are done annually or are done through new bond issues. The third column is retirement, basically paying down the principal on that debt. The next column shows the outstanding balance as of June 30, 2024, the end of our fiscal year. And the far right column shows the interest paid on that debt. And it's categorized with buildings, departmental equipment, sewer, other, and then there's that's inside of the debt limit. And then there's this next section dealing with outside of the debt limit. And you have primarily the water projects. You have subtotals for inside, outside, and then the total long-term debt. The ending balance of June 30, 2024 is a total of $45,417,716. And if you go on to page 2, it shows if there were any short-term borrowings going on, revenue anticipation notes, bond anticipation notes, state and federal grant notes. The next section is called authorized and unissued debt. This is basically the debt that's authorized by town meeting. And you'll see the first column, the total amount authorized. This would be the original amount authorized by town meeting. Then you've got a column called issued, retired, or rescinded. And then you've got a balance of unissued as of June 30, 2024. The largest item dealing with the East Harwich wastewater collection at $54 million being authorized. This past May, we issued $100,000 the town when they sold bonds, so that the balance remaining unissued is $53,900,000. The $100,000 was issued by the town through a public sale because there were certain costs for the wastewater projects that would not be reimbursed by the Clean Water Trust. The balance of the contracts that the town had gone out to bid for 2 wastewater projects known as 2319 and 2319A. The total of the projects based on going out to bid and the Clean Water Trust has approved funding for $41,921,975. The benefit of being funded through the trust is that the town is not paying, the town will be paying back the trust over a 30-year period at 0% interest. In addition to that, for this project, the state will be providing some loan forgiveness to the amount of $2,221,866, or 5.3% of the total project costs. So it's a great deal for the community. At the bottom of page 2 and going on to page 3, you'll see a listing or detailed listing of all of the individual issues with the original issue date. Halfway down, you'll see something called land acquisition, $165,000. It was issued back in October of 2012. This year, we made the last payment of last year we made the final payment of that bond issue. So the outstanding balance of June 30, 22 was 0, and the interest paid on that last year of the issue was $1,650. You'll see going on to page 3, the balance for the inside the debt, the outside of the debt limit, and that's a summary basically of the town's debt position. And it's required to be filed every year for all of the communities in the Commonwealth. I don't know if there are questions on that, or if you wanted me to just go on to the next item.
Why don't you hold right here, Ed, if you don't mind? I'll go to the board and FinCom as well. Don, did you have a question?
Actually, I just wanted to ask you to repeat the number, because this is something that comes up all the time in town meetings, and it comes up every single January 1st when people get a bill, say, you guys have a Prop 2.5 ability, but my taxes went way up. The unborrowed but authorized number is again, so that the public can hear that.
The authorized and unissued amount at June 30, 2024 is $73,095,533.
Which is yet to reach anybody's tax bill.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
I'll defer for now. Thank you.
Julie?
I don't have anything right now.
Pete?
I know it's not required in this report, but, and I know I want to see a larger debt schedule, but is there an option to have a column that talks about the retirement date of these particular items? You know, obviously, as you said, the land acquisition back in 2012 retired this year, but I don't have retirement dates for any of the others. And I know the information somewhere.
Yes, I can get you the
It's
information.
just not readily
Not
available.
required by this report.
Okay. So, I actually pulled a debt schedule that, I meant to share it with the board already, and I forgot to send it, so I'll send it to the board for discussion, because I think, again, it's something that will contain the information that we'll, I think, be able to find useful as we plan and make recommendations to town meeting going forward. So, clearly, if it's something the board has interest in, I'm happy to share with you folks as well. And if we adopt it and use it, we can go from there.
Great. Michael, did you want to jump in? Okay. Peter?
I'm good. Thank you.
Bob?
Just an informational maybe for people listening. Could you just describe what is debt that is inside the debt limit and debt that is outside the debt limit?
Chapter 44, Section 7 and 8 deal with the debt authorization for cities and towns. Chapter 7 is debt within the debt limit. Section 8 deals with it outside of the debt limit.
So what does that mean to a taxpayer? How,
Generally, Chapter 44, Section 7 would cover things like school building repairs, purchase of fire engines, things like that. Things outside of the debt limit would cover, generally it's major enterprise fund type activity, like your wastewater systems, if you had electric utilities, airports, those types of things. Again, within the statute, it spells out the specific items, what they are, and then the maximum term for borrowing for each of those under the Chapter 44 of the Mass General Laws.
thank you.
You good? Yeah, it's good. Scott, you use the mic, please.
Joe?
Just before you hear from another
Sure.
speaker, to follow on that question, if I'm correct, you also want to reference the last page that we talked about, the legal debt margin. Is that also the debt limit? That's talking about inside and out? Am I saying this right, Ed?
Yes.
So, for the example of for the taxpayer, so as you can see on the statement of indebtedness, most of our debt is inside the debt limit. It's inside the margin that's allowed under 44.7. So what I'd also want the residents and taxpayers to be aware of, and it relates to a later conversation tonight on a potential wastewater project and going forward. We have most of our construction projects under inside the limit. If we ever have to resume the conversation of sewer treatment, we're not going to be having school buildings because we have the regional district and that's their statement of indebtedness. But we would have a major project like that, and that's what you'd see on the outside the debt limit. So if I could, I'd like to jump ahead real quick to that debt limit, that last document you see there, because I think there's a lot of information in that that will help us as we get through statement of indebtedness. So if you look at the legal debt limit margin, Ed will be able to talk to it better than I can. And again, I'm now looking at, it might be better to do this as a portrait, not a landscape. But the first row of data, and it's 10-year period from 2014 to 2023, and that's because we had to report it in a massive report a year ago that we update every year. Equalized valuation, generally speaking, that's the value of the community, not just your single-family residences, but all of your value in the town. That would include, on Cape Cod, municipalities that have a lot of second homes for homeowners and, in some cases, third homes. So equalized valuation is going to be a determining factor in both the legal limit and the outside the legal limit. So I'm going to yield to have Ed speak to that and correct it, but what the limit gets to, and if I'm understanding the tutorials that Ed has given me, when you look on page 2 of the statement of indebtedness, and you look at the town having, as of fiscal year ~24, and as was reported through September 30th of 2024, the town has issued $48 million in debt. The town has on the books $73 million unissued, as it went to a previous question. We know the largest part of that delta is the $54 million for Phase 3. And you've heard Mr. Spellman talk about the benefit of the state revolving fund and the 0%. But I also want to put out there, the town does not want to hit that $54 million mark. That's what was voted at town meeting and another town meeting, to make sure that we had more than sufficient appropriations to meet the construction cost. So the likelihood, well, not the likelihood, it is our driving philosophy and desire to not make that issued number go up by the higher unissued number. So that's point number one. Point number two, because of our equalized valuation, you look at a legal debt margin of about $250+ million, I think. And that's on the construction type projects we just talked about. But if we ever have to have a conversation about a wastewater treatment facility, and that's just a hypothetical, because again, we can't talk about school buildings, that wouldn't relate for us, and we're not gonna do an airport. That number goes from $250 million to $357 million. And so that's the Commonwealth saying, these are your debt limits that are available to you. So these numbers look big, but in comparison, we're nowhere near the limits, not that we ever want to get there. And what we have issued versus unissued may never be realized, or certainly not to the full extent. I promise you the chance to talk, I'll shut up now.
Again, the state statute deals with the 5% limit of the equalized valuation. And in the far right column of the computational legal debt margin, which is basically, it's page 116 of our annual comprehensive financial report. What this page shows is basically a 10-year history. And you'll see for fiscal year '23, the equalized valuation of $7.1 billion and a 5% equalized valuation debt limit of that would be approximately $357 million. From that number, that total, you take out the outstanding debt applicable to the limit. You take out the authorized and unissued, the total, the $80,189,000, and that leaves you with your legal debt margin of $255 million. And that would be, again, under the 5%, the maximum amount of additional debt the town could authorize and take on. There is one exception that allows you to go to a double debt limit. And primarily, it deals with the school building. Communities building a new high school could spend $200, $300, $400 million on school building. The town would need to authorize that total amount of debt, and what happens, the MSBA would contribute in an approved project somewhere between 50% and 90% would be paid by the state or reimbursed by the school building authority. So that in some cases, communities have had to go and get the 5% debt limit extended to the double debt to cover a major school building project. But the $255 million is what is available to the town for additional debt, and I don't see that happening. I don't think it would be a good thing, in my opinion, for the town, but it shows that there's a capacity there. And with the funding for the Clean Water Trusts, this is the best bang for your buck in getting approved by them for the specific projects. Again, with the current project we're working on, there's $41.9 million that's going to be be funded through them. And that's based on the $53,900,000 that's authorized and unissued. So that when we issue these bonds in 2 years, that will go from being reduced from the authorized unissued schedule to the actual bond payment. And we'll be paying the debt to the trust annually and not going out to the public market for competitive bond sale.
I'm going to go to Scott real quick if I can.
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm that the debt service on projects both within and outside Proposition 2.5 are included in the operating budget, right?
Not necessarily in Appendix B.
Really?
What, correct. What you're looking at in Appendix B is the 3.4 million that is the excluded from Prop 2.5. But what you'll see in other articles, most especially water and wastewater, is debt payments that are there. So that's why it's not all in Appendix B. Because Appendix B supports Article 4, general government,
Right.
does not support enterprise government.
So in the general government budget, is there debt service for projects both within and outside Proposition 2.5?
The majority of the town's debt is in the general fund at $3.8 million is excluded from Prop 2.5. Generally, the water debt service is paid by the Water Enterprise Fund.
Right.
It's in the water budget, and that debt's not exempted. That's being paid by the ratepayers of the Water Enterprise Fund.
I guess I was confused by the title of this debt service schedule that has the total of 3.4 million. It says at the top, excluded from Proposition 2.5, which I interpreted to mean that this only includes the debt service on projects outside of Proposition 2.5, but it includes projects that fit within 2.5 as well, that didn't have an exclusion when they were voted on, right?
No, that debt service for the various purposes listed is excluded from Prop 2.5.
So there are none that are within 2.5 in the general government budget, then, since this ties out to Appendix B.
That's in the general fund budget, correct. And then if you look to the water budget, you'll see water debt service for $723,000 applicable to the water enterprise and paid by the ratepayers. There's also a small betterment that's being paid by the ratepayers assessed to the, I believe, it's the street betterments.
Okay. Thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll forgive me, Mr. Spellman. I'm going to try to get this back into some English for the taxpayers to understand. To what the previous speaker was just saying, just everyone needs to understand that when you do vote a major capital project, like the sewers, it is outside of Prop 2.5 because you're authorizing something to happen that wasn't within the confines of that, first of all. Second of all, regardless of what you're talking about in terms of debt forgiveness, that's interest mostly. I mean, they're not going to forgive the entire project, correct?
This current project, the Harwich Phase 3.
All of the phases.
Of the $41.9 million, the Clean Water Trust is going to forgive $2.2 million of principal.
That's what I wanted everybody to hear. It's a no-interest loan, but you're not getting the sewer project for free over time that they're going to shove back to reimburse us for stuff. It is money, and it is principal, and I really appreciate that, but the taxpayers need to know that they are going outside of Prop 2.5. That's why their tax bills are going up each year, because at a town meeting, they agreed to do that and to borrow for a major project.
Correct. This is adding on top of your average tax bill that can go up by 2.5% plus new growth each year.
And that's what I'm trying to get the public to understand. There's a whole bunch of variables that are going on here, but the bottom line is big projects get approved at a town meeting outside of Prop 2.5 to be borrowed by the public at such time as we put out a bond. And either it goes through the state, which, by the way, you have to ask for. It just doesn't automatically show up, and that discussion will happen later on. when we're talking about a new project. It's something that has timelines and requirements to put in at the proper moment in order to get eligible for it and approved for it. And it certainly isn't 100% of the project. That's what I really want everybody to understand.
Correct, there's an application process, and the exact numbers are based on construction costs that the town has gone out to bid for. In this specific Harwich plan, these contract is broken up into two components, an administrative and engineering and administrative portion, and then a construction portion.
And there's nothing nefarious going on. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that, because up until the last 10 years, we really weren't borrowing with this kind of magnitude for different phases of sewering, that in the dollars 10 years ago, not constant dollars, was already estimated at about $350 million.
Joe, did you want to add something to that?
Oh, I just wanted to ask, I thought I heard before that exchange that there was a reference to all the phases.
Eventually, we're going to be asked to implement the comprehensive wastewater management plan, and there are numerous phases in that. We have stretched them out so it would be more digestible, if you will, by the taxpaying public. But nonetheless, there is a pretty heavy debt load that we, and pretty much every town on the Cape, have to incur from the state revolving fund, hopefully. But eventually, you're borrowing money, and you still have to pay back the majority of the principal of that money. That's the only point I'm trying to make, is that the public is engaged in a series of borrowings that started about 10 years ago and that are going to continue on for the foreseeable future.
Not a gift or a grant, it's a loan.
That's my point. So
And I look forward to the pie chart.
because every
at
year
this
in
point.
January, we get the angst, how come my bill's up higher than 2%? That's
Make a pie chart,
why.
I'm telling you.
Pete? Nothing?
Good.
Michael, Julie? All right.
So I think the next thing we can cover, because we've talked about indebtedness, we've talked about debt service itself, is sort of related to everything, and that would be the sources and uses document. And again, the breakout within that on specifically estimated local receipts. So again, this is a document that sort of builds on past practice. And what it's meant to, I think, demonstrate is, first of all, comparisons year over year, but also that as we work through the budget process, and I think it was said earlier by other speakers, you know, these numbers may change. The goal is to get into town meeting with the numbers as solid as possible. Many of the numbers are coming into shape, but this is, one, the revenue that we have available, and two, to pay off the expenses that are listed there. So you can see that total estimated revenue goes up year over year by just over 5%. And estimated expenses, all in, went up year over year 5.34. But you can also see that there is no deficit, and there is a essential operating surplus, if you will, between the two. So you can see how we go up on levy limit, other revenue. You can see where the expenses are shaping up. Again, there's a deeper dive into Article 4. So with Article 4, what you'll see there is those numbers are represented in the overall Appendix B, last page. But what you'll also see typically, if there's no change to the process, is in the warrant, Article 4 will show you the dollar amount that you see on its subtotal Article 4, but you'll also see a table that's meant to give evidence to the various sources that we use, because we don't simply rely upon property taxes. For all of this, we have other sources that are available, and that's what you see in the revenue. So, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, plural, this again ties back to the budget message that was presented last week. Again, it's meant to tie back to Article 4 generally, and to a previous statement. This really gets to the true fact that the town of Harwich is essentially a municipal corporation that has expenses and revenues of $83 million.
Any questions or input from the board? Michael?
Does the town of Harwich have a forecasting policy?
You have several policies that get into forecasting, like free cash, which I was speaking of last week. I think it gets to your revenue plan, bless you. And also use of free cash versus stabilization. I'm not aware of a policy that says forecasting per se, but I can go back and look.
I'd like to see one if we have one.
Sure.
Really gets into my other question is, stand by. Other funding sources. Is that underneath of the sources and uses? Is that the other?
So you're looking at the sources and uses document, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so other revenue is beyond the levy limit. And so those are the categories that you can see there. State aid is local aid. However, the number doesn't match what you see with the report because there is an allowance that's deducted on the library side because that has to be treated separately. We have our local receipts, and again, on Cape Cod, for communities like ours, we can't rely upon state aid, so we end up relying upon local receipt estimates. Other sources of funding are other sources. Some of them that you may recall in years past that I think we're going to be relying upon this year would be the special purpose stabilization funds. So we had those earmarked specifically for things to do with wastewater projects and affordable housing, and there are other such funds that are available. And again, that typically gets broken out on the table in Article 4. The earlier commentary about the overlay surplus, right now we're forecasting for no increase whatsoever, and should that number change in the negative, we'll account for it, and if the number should change in the positive, we would either rely upon that or make changes in other uses. And then, as Ed was saying before, and where it gets a little bit more convoluted, if you will, is indirect costs that relate to wastewater operations and indirect costs that relate to water. So these are revenues that are coming in, and you can see towards the bottom there are subsidies that also go out.
Thank you. That's it for now.
Pete? Just to touch on that particular line item, the other sources of funding, that has the 59, almost 60% increase this year. Where are we gonna see that detail?
So as we're working through the articles, first in Article 4, there's a list of the different things we're relying upon. It'll appear in any other articles where we're relying upon it. So I'll draw that out. We'll have a table that we can incorporate in the overall document if you want, that ties back to the other sources.
Okay.
What they were, how much we're using, and what the fund balance was at a certain date.
Okay. And it looks like, my number could be off a little bit, but so the local receipts for FY '26 are about 94% of the actuals of 2024, is that correct?
He's doing percentages, so I'm looking at you.
We've taken the 24 actual, looked at the 25 budget, and then also factored in the first 6 months through December 31 of fiscal 95, fiscal 25, sorry. And used a combination of those two to make projections for the budget for fiscal 26, column B on the far right.
It looked like to me it's roughly about 94% of what was the actual in 24. So again, better than I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to be higher than that. So, but all right, thank you for that clarification. Nothing else at this time. Let me back up. I do. So, schools. When are we having? And I know the soup was around, but he's not here for us. When are we having the schools in? Do we know?
I believe the 24th. I know that Cape Tech has confirmed, but I'll check with Dr. Carpenter to see when that is. We strive to do that in February.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Don?
I've said quite enough.
Julie?
Just related to the budget and money, have we done the article sweep from the past articles we talked about a couple months ago? Have we do?
We haven't done the sweep, but we are tracking that, and that'll be part of your discussion with the articles as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Nothing else.
Nothing? Peter?
I think for folks watching at home, maybe in the audience behind us, first line on levy limit and 2.5% increase going across, and how it ends up being 3.48%. You might clarify that.
That's a 2.5 plus the new growth, right?
The point is, we talk about Prop 2.5, and you'd think that would say 2.5, maybe, but it says 3.48. So I'm just asking a question.
Percent changes going from year over year, and to get the beginning basis for this year, you're using the previous year's base, plus the 2.5% growth, plus the 2.5% increase, and the new growth figure. So you have the levy, the 52,443,000,
So
plus the
new- so-
2.5% of 1,311,000,
But the new growth has to get added into it.
plus the new growth, correct?
Okay, that's what's not clear, because it looks like you just have one line. And you get the 3.48, I'm sorry. But the 500,000 below for new growth has to get added in.
It's added in, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Is that it? Okay. Did you have something?
Oh, that's it?
Okay.
Ring the bell.
Well, thank you both for putting this together, unless you have anything else you want.
I would just say we're going, oops,
Sorry, Scott's behind you.
go ahead, Scott.
I just have one
Jump in.
question on the school.
Scott, you don't have to go to the mic for this one. No, I'm kidding. You have to go to the mic.
Just two things. One is kind of a repeat from last week. The revenue assumption for local receipts. There is a state guidance that says that you should budget 90% of recent actual receipts. So I don't know if we have one here, but that is something that's in writing at the state level. On the Monomoy school assessment growth of 7.5%, you got something from the school that gives you that high rate of increase already before they come with a presentation?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
The school assessment, 7.5% increase for Monomoy. You got that from them, or is it
So-
to be replaced by
If I
their
may, yeah.
presentation?
So, there is a public document that is their budget. We derived it from that. However, I will now self-report to the superintendent
Send that around.
that Ed and I took
Send
the
that around to you.
prerogative of changing
They just-
your number to reflect the 6.5% health insurance rather than the 10. So that's our number for now. It does not comport with their number generally, but we expect that to change.
So we should wait for any detailed questions on that number for a school presentation, correct?
Well, I think it's fair to the schools to always wait for their presentations, and
Okay.
we're hoping to do that this month. But, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add something?
I think-
Please.
Because I know the comment was made about the state guidance on the 90%, and I'm not here to challenge that, except to say that there's also state guidance on free cash. And so I do want to get to that point tonight of the delta between what we budgeted in fiscal year '24 of 15.4 million and actually receiving 18.5 million is what causes free cash. And there's been commentary over the years about free cash neither being free nor cash and all of that. I get all those comments. But as I said last week, we, administration and finance, are relying upon state guidance that says that free cash has a positive effect on your credit rating. Having said all of that, we're at 94% because we're trying to do a forecast that's more accurate so that there's less free cash. Again, it's a forecast, but it's also tying to policy. Now, if we truly aim to reduce free cash, that's a policy discussion. And it should be a policy discussion that emanates from the board and that the finance committee is aware of. So we're aware of the 90%. We're also aware of the guidance that says free cash can be very helpful for a community. So tonight's forecast is meant to try to capture both of those. Having said all of that, it's a forecast, and we're subject to the sunshine and the folks that have the good sense to come here every summer and separate them from their money.
Board?
Good marketing.
Anything? Julie?
No.
Don?
No.
Pete?
What's that?
Peter?
I would just say, hopefully next week, if we do a joint meeting, which I think we agreed we're gonna do a joint meeting, and listen to those presentations on the budget, maybe we can carve out 5 minutes just to say, what's our plan going forward? For instance, you give us a budget on the 24th, we'll have a hearing on the 27th, we'll start reviewing things. I do believe we should get together once or twice after that, just to say, hey, where are we? You know what I mean? If we need to shave something or do something or move something or whatever, we gotta do that by sitting here and discussing it, as opposed to just assuming somebody's doing something or not doing something.
I think that's a great idea, and I'll make a
Yeah,
note
you
here
know,
to
you
have
and I
us.
can coordinate the time,
Absolutely.
you know, whatever. But,
Perfect. Thank you both, and thank you all for
Oh.
coming from Finance, and if you want to
And,
adjourn.
Finance committee will be adjourned. You guys said to adjourn? We're out. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
You're welcome to stay.
If I could,
Yep,
Do I want to stay? Yeah.
I want to thank my colleague, Mr.
Please.
Spellman. He deals with the bridge, so unless there's objection, I think we should let him go.
If I, just before Mr. Spellman leaves, and I appreciate being here, Ed, what I would like to see, and I know we talked about it previously, whenever you can, is the revenue and expense reports. What I'd like to see is the Q2 FY '25 actuals versus Q2 '24 FY '24 actuals. Again, I don't need this, I'm not looking for you to give me answers tonight, but I was hoping that we were gonna see that sometime in January, as far as the comparison of the actual versus actual, so whenever you get a chance.
4 and 25?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll check and see if I can get it from Eunice. If not, we'll run 2 reports and put it together for you.
would you just send that to the whole board if you don't mind? Thank you, Ed.
Yep.
All right, Ed. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you, all your efforts. Okay. Nothing more on that. We'll move on to new business. Item A, discussion on 2025 annual town meeting. We have item 1 is the potential tree bylaw.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Please.
first, you're going to hear from the resident that is looking for this conversation on the tree bylaw. I will be presenting information on a zoning bylaw, and then we will have the conversation as referred earlier to a potential Great Sand Lakes project, and I apologize, it says Phase 3 in the agenda, that's recognized as Phase 3A. And then, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to step out for a minute. I shall return, but you can certainly get into your tree bylaw discussion.
Please, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Patrick, if you want to take the microphone, please.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I promise I won't mention any numbers. I do have my comments. I printed them out if you'd like to have a copy. Mr. Mastasko.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm here tonight for an ask, and that ask is whether or not the select board would represent the town and take this bylaw on as their own initiative. Let me explain. Trees are the most valuable resource on earth above anything else. Platinum, silver, gold, rare earth metals, etc., whatever. Without trees, there would be no life as we know it. You and I would not exist. Trees are a tremendous asset to our community and to our environment. Trees provide oxygen, shade, life to all other things. For example, oaks host over 300 species of insects, which are food source for many other birds, reptiles, and mammals. Trees control flooding and runoff. Trees also provide the wood with which we build our communities. But that's just the physical benefit of trees, materials, and stuff. Harwich is zoned primarily as a rural residential area. Why? Just because they're tree heirs? Yes. But why? What is the human aesthetic, the human emotional connection to trees? Trees are important to our state of mind, our well-being. Without trees, we would suffer tremendous debilitating pain and dysfunctions. Trees make us happy. They settle our minds. Preservation of trees is a public purpose that protects the ecology, public health, welfare, environment, and aesthetic character of the town of Harwich. Trees add value to our property and community. So I'm asking the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and all the other boards, committees, commissions to take on and support the tree preservation bylaw before you. I'm asking that the tree preservation bylaw be town-initiated. This bylaw is copied from Mashpee, which was passed in the fall of 2023. The text of the bylaw was reviewed and okayed by the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee in '24. I don't know if town council saw it or not, but let's look at the bylaw itself. The bylaw is intended to protect trees. This bylaw addresses trees on lots that are being developed. That is, where and when building or construction is being done. This bylaw encourages the protection of trees during the building activities and monitors their survival. This bylaw defines which trees are of preservation value, we call those protected trees, and designates the area of the lot where those trees are protected. That's called the tree yard, which is the setback perimeter of all the lots. This bylaw does not prohibit a landowner's right to remove a protected tree. Removal of protected trees will be authorized so long as the property owner undertakes one of the mitigation options. This bylaw does not prevent the removal of hazardous trees. This article does not address nor restrict cutting or removal of trees outside of the tree yard, nor does this article prevent an owner from cutting or removing trees if there's no building activities. We live in a town of Harwich as a community. As such, Harwich has a code to help us live together, telling us what we can and cannot do. For example, the code governing noise, parking, animals, building, and our own behavior, on and on. The tree preservation bylaw will also tell us what we can and cannot do for the betterment of our community. Leaving trees in the perimeter of lots gives each lot a buffer zone, increases monetary value, and allows nature to flourish, and preserves the rural character of Harwich. The intent of this bylaw is to minimize the clear cutting of lots, recognizing the value of trees and encouraging the preservation of existing trees for their environmental and community benefits. I'm asking that the Select Board, as representatives of Harwich residents, that this tree preservation law be town-initiated. That's the presentation. You have the actual bylaw format before you in the appendix, so if I can answer questions, I will, or take your comments. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for being here, Patrick, and I'll go to the board. So just to be clear, the ask tonight from you is that the tree preservation bylaw be town-initiated and not a citizen's petition on your part. Is that?
Correct.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing what your request
Yes.
is. Okay,
That's accurately stated, yes.
great. So I'll go to the board. Does anyone want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, Julie, please.
So Patrick, you say that you're looking for this board and FinCom and any other boards and committees and commissions to take on and support this tree preservation bylaw. Have you already gone to various boards?
Not
out of
yet.
curiosity? So you intend to do that?
Yes, I will be.
Okay.
Yes.
And then just again, to reiterate, this is a perimeter, the setback, which is the tree yard. So, for example, if you have a 20-foot setback on side and rear and a 40 in the front, and then 20 in the rear, whatever, I'm making it up. That's your perimeter.
Yes.
And that if you're not building anything at all, and you have a tree anywhere on your property and you want to take it down, but you're not building anything, you're not subject to this.
Correct. And you can take it down in the setback areas as well.
Right, so as long as you're not building anything,
You're not
you're not
building.
talking about trees,
Correct.
you know, taking them down or any kind of mitigation, right?
Correct.
Okay, so this is only, and I'm saying this because I believe I understand it, but I think it can be confusing and there's a lot of information. So just so the public understands, your priority here is to try to protect trees, obviously, to create a natural buffer, and to work with the zoning setbacks.
Yes.
And only have this be in play, which would be a review, I think, as I see this outline, as either a site plan review or planning board reviewing if you had to go to them as part of your building.
Correct.
Otherwise, it would be the building department if you were within your setbacks, but
It
how would
doesn't-
they really know
You're
it?
not bound by it if you're not building, correct.
Okay. I just have different questions on how this could possibly even play out in terms of review, but I'll stop there to let the rest of the board.
Don?
Nothing on that.
Pete?
Good.
Michael?
I'm set.
So I just have a question, Patrick. I see here in your schematic, there's a driveway,
Yes,
and that driveway is part of your shaded area. So if that was a heavy, densely populated area with trees, there would be a mitigation to that. There
Right.
would be a fee from the homeowner to create a driveway to their home.
it's either a fee or you plant the equivalent of the diameter of the tree removed, half the diameter of the tree removed. So if the tree was 20 inches in diameter that you cut, you would need to replace with an equivalent plantings of 10 inches.
Or the fee can, again, for the public here, just in case they missed it or didn't quite get it, there could be a fee paid to a fund for the town that could then go and, through a town meeting, have trees planted throughout the town in public areas.
Correct, yeah. It becomes part of the town operating budget, or, okay, revenue.
Well,
I'm not going to mention numbers.
yeah, that's good.
We'll make it a revolving.
Yeah, we can make it a revolving fund.
You can even make it
Tree in,
free
tree out.
cash.
Thanks for that, Julie.
Well done, Julie. It was about time she chimed in with something. Something humorous. That was great. And do you know if Mashpee, do they use their town planner as the person who oversees this?
Yes,
That's who they use?
and I can give you her name, I forgot.
No, that's okay. So I guess the question before the board now, since there's no other comments, is does this board want this to be town-initiated? And I believe we're going to have to do, I guess we would have a motion, and then we would do yay or nay.
We only have a motion if it's positive, right?
You want consensus? Is that what we can do? Can we do consensus of the board on this, or do we need a vote?
You have a colleague that wants to speak.
With no positive motion, it's no action.
Okay,
That's what I
so they have it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
very good, thank you.
said. Thank you, Pat.
Number
Mr. Chairman,
two?
if I could, number two is zoning-related articles. And that topic actually is derived from your town council. So specifically, what we're talking about is, first in your packet, you can see a document that's entitled 760 CMR, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and 760 CMR 71.00, Protected Use Accessory Dwelling Units. So as you go through this, you'll see that this was authorized by legislation that was adopted in 2024. It was sponsored by Her Excellency the Governor, and it went into effect as of February 2nd, 2025. So that was a week ago Sunday. The net effect of this legislation is that the town's existing accessory dwelling unit bylaws sections are now moot. So what you also have in your packet is a 4-page document provided by council that talks about the areas in our zoning bylaws that were impacted by this new state law and that are being recommended for deletion or amendment. However, the purpose for you this evening is if you wish this to go through the process, you must vote to send it to the planning board. That begins a formal regulated process where the Director of Planning and Community Development and I will shepherd this to the planning board, and with our town clerk, we'll work it through the process if it gets on your warrant and if it gets voted at town meeting. So the ask this evening specifically is for you to take this topic and refer it through administrator to the planning board for their review and consideration. It does not constitute in any way, shape, or form support by the select board. That will potentially come at a later date.
Right, thank you, Joe. Can I get a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. I move that we send the zoning-related articles specifically, well, do you want me to make it for ADU only, or?
Yes, please.
For ADU, to the planning board for review, according to the new state laws.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? John?
Yeah, since we're just sending it, I just want to have this question. Was the intent here broadly to just do accessory dwelling units? Because I've pointed out in the past that if they're affordable restricted ADUs, that's a whole different outcome. We haven't had anybody really step forward to do that because an awful lot of people are reticent to put a restriction on a property that would have to convey if they sold the house. So is this just generically ADUs?
Yeah, I mean, I think.
I mean, I totally support full that because we absolutely need more lower middle class and middle class housing that's full-time. But I just want everybody to know that it's not that narrow swath. It actually is by right, within the buildings as prescribed.
Yeah, well, through you.
Please.
I think, one of the things that I'm trying to understand with this new legislation is, all the work that the various towns tried to put forward to get exactly that, or at least workforce housing, is now back into this. I feel like we've taken a step back if I'm understanding it and interpreting it correctly, but regardless, it's in our zoning bylaws and we need to clean it up.
Thank you for that.
Any other discussion? Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0, Joe.
Thank you.
Government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Meaning need for the people.
Right.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, the third item, there is some information that I wanted to present before yielding to the board and anyone else that wishes to discuss this. What you have in your packet, first you should see there's a document with a headline, Proposed Warrant Article. This is not the town's article. This is the article that was referenced briefly under public comment, and we would hope and expect has the opportunity to talk about tonight. However, I want to draw your attention to the document from the Department of Environmental Protection labeled the Draft 2025 Intended Use Plan for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. It was issued on January 30th, 2025. I believe the material you have in your packet is at least the first 5 or 6 pages of that report. Oh, sorry, a little bit more. But long story short, what this is getting to is, as you know, the town has an existing comprehensive wastewater management plan. However, that plan is actually in abeyance. You may recall that the town voted at special town meeting in October of 2022 to revisit the comprehensive wastewater management plan in light of where the town was at with projects that were underway or completed and future projects such as Phase 3 that are now underway. The other the part that impacted upon that was during that time frame or soon thereafter, we heard that the Mass Department of Environmental Protection was reevaluating their regulations regarding wastewater, sewer, septic, and particularized that discussion to Cape Cod. And so we have new DEP regulations that went into effect in January of 2024. And so you will be hearing, and Mr. Chairman, I know you had a brief conversation with our engineering firm on matters of wastewater, GHD Engineering. They will be presenting later this year, I believe in the lines of early spring, on a future iteration of a watershed management plan, which is meant to now dovetail with the new regulations. That's why it's called watershed management and not necessarily comprehensive wastewater. And so you will be rephasing in the future, but we have not rephased yet. However, it is accurate to say that GHD was directed by the Select Board and supported by administration through funds through the Barnstable County ARPA to do design work on a proposed, what's now being referred to as Phase 3A, or the Great Sand Lakes. Well, let me read it as it's listed in the intended use plan for the Commonwealth. It is referred to as the Harwich Great Sand Lake Sewer Extension Project. As was mentioned before, the preliminary numbers provided by GHD and submitted in our application show a project that's estimated presently at $31,130,000. So our application for contemplation of state revolving fund support and, excuse me, CWT, and I couldn't tell you right now what CWT stands for other than Clean Water Trust. There we go. Long story short, I have in your draft warrant that you will be reviewing in total on February 24th, an article that has to be reviewed by legal and bond counsel, but it is an article that would seek the proper appropriation of town meeting and the authorization to go forward on this project. So that is in your draft warrant that will be available on February 24th at the latest. However, folks in our town have availed themselves of their right, as we learned last week, in great detail from our town clerk, under the Massachusetts Constitution to petition an article. So what you're about to hear is a presentation by folks that are impacted by Great Sand Lakes project about a potential article. I wanted you to be aware that there is an article that's also going to accomplish a lot of that. And so, Mr. Chairman, you've authorized to have this conversation tonight. I will yield with the closing that the town has an article that'll be in the warrant.
Does anybody in the public like to speak to this? Okay, so hearing none.
If I could speak again, I'm happy to read the petition that you put together, so it's not presented
You've already read that, is that correct, into the record?
forward. No, I did not read the petition.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. So please, go to the mic if you don't mind. And just state your name for the
Yes,
record.
of course, Ann Frechette,
Thank you.
Paradise Path. I'm representing Great Sand Lakes Association, and I have put together a citizen petition article. And as I said before, if the article that the town puts together does the job that we want to see, then I'm happy to withdraw it and let the town's warrant article be what's presented at town meeting. But given that as of right now, and looks like as of February 14th, there will not be a town warrant article, we do want to take our rights as citizens to make sure that the voters of this town know that there was an allocation and that we'd like for the town to accept that allocation. So what I have put together, and thank you for your comments on this earlier, is that the article would reads, to see if the town will vote to accept funds allocated in the Massachusetts Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan 2025 for the purpose of sewer line construction along Queen Anne Road in East Harwich. And the explanation is that the town of Harwich submitted an application to the State Revolving Fund for the purpose of constructing sewer lines along Queen Anne Road in East Harwich as Phase 3A of the sewer construction plan. The draft intended use plan published by the SRF includes a funding amount of $31,130,000 for Harwich for the project. Acceptance of the funds will help offset expenditures related to Phase 3A. Prioritizing the construction of sewers along Queen Anne Road relates to the presence of town wells for drinking water to the south of the proposed sewer lines, protection of the water quality in Bucks and John Joseph ponds, and efficient use of unused sewer flow allocation that Harwich pays to the town of Chatham for wastewater treatment. So we are going to be going forward with this, and we look forward to seeing what the town puts together as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll go to the board. Does anybody want to start? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Off of this initial discussion, I'm a representative for the Clean Waters County Board, and I did have the discussion with Christy Sanatori. Indeed, Joe did put in for an IUP. I think everybody needs to understand what an IUP is. I mean, it's not like you submit it and you get money. It makes you eligible as an eligible property or project to be able to pull this off. So it's been accepted, but this isn't, it isn't as if we send them a bill and they give you money. I mean, it's not money that you're accepting, it's money you're requesting as part of their no-interest program for SRF funding. So you got it sounding in here as if you vote to accept funds. You're really voting to request funds under the IUP. And in best case, you get money from the county that's allocated through the rooms taxes and the state through the SRF, State Revolving Fund. But it's not simply that, yeah, we want this, just so you understand.
No, you have to, you have to,
It's more like it has to be an approved project, which we've gotten to that point. But you have to be able to have more project there. You flesh it out with an actual real project that has parameters, and then you submit that to the state prior to, what is it, June 30th, I think it is? So, and there's cycles for this. Again, it's not just that you're accepting money, because if we took no action, say we vote for this, there has to be follow-on action of some sort, or you don't get the money. It's not just like you're on record as stating you'll accept it.
I'm aware of that.
no, yeah, I'm sorry, you have to go to the mic if you want to reply, which you can if you'd like.
Well, is
No,
that an
I-
actual real question to me, or is that just rhetorical?
I'm not going to discuss it with you while you're at the chair, but if you'd like to come to the microphone and ask your question to the board member, that would be appropriate. Thank you so much.
Again, this is Ann Frechette from Great Sand Lakes. I am confused as to whether that is a rhetorical question or that was an actual real question to me. But if it was an actual real question to me, yes, I do understand the process. Thank you.
Well, great, because that's not what you're asking for.
You all set?
Again, if you read the statement, that doesn't get you to where we need to get to actually be as an eligible project with the state. That's just for the record.
Understood. Michael?
Is there, maybe through you to the town administrator?
Sure.
Is there a cost estimate, any idea projection-wise of what the total project cost would be?
So at present, that application number is the cost.
Okay.
That's for construction. However, it does not include, as other projects have had in the past, any funds for stormwater. So stormwater would be a separate discussion. You know, as you already know, I think in Phase 3, whenever there's sewer construction, we like to have our Public Works Department follow in and reconstruct the sewers. That's not, excuse me, the storm. That's not part of this. This is just for sewer construction only. And that is the current design cost. I believe the next step would be to get design to 90%, but that happens after we have our meeting with the state on March 3rd.
To your point on the stormwater, is that something we'll be able to get an estimate? We're certainly not gonna tear all the roads up and then do it again.
I would agree with that comment, and yes, you will. DPW and GHD are working on that separate and distinct stormwater cost.
Thank you. I think to Don's point, what are the conditions on the clean water, well, to Don's statement, and a question, I guess, through you, Mr. Chair, to Don. Clean Water Trust, is that similar to our CPC, where if we don't use the money in a certain amount of time, we lose it?
No, but you're competing with all 15 towns for this, and there's a rank order. Everybody has to submit. That's kind of my point is you have to submit for it, and you're competing with other people. The major threshold we have already passed. My first question is, does this have an intended use plan associated with it, and is it an appropriate use? Because it's freshwater as opposed to saltwater embayments, and they said yes. It went through the whole process. So the next thing is, as Joe said, we wind up having to design it out, because they're only giving money to real projects. You can't have a placeholder there, so you would have to actually go and approve a project and then submit it to the county, and then line up in the queue along with the other 14 towns to compete for what your allocable number is. There's a specific percentage, but it really is limited by a couple of things, not the least of which is how much money is that tax generating? Because we had an actuarial done, it had to be redone already once, because it was siphoning money off faster than they anticipated.
Thank you. Through you to the town administrator, has any conversation started with GHD and the town of Chatham on whether or not they would even accept this?
No, just not anything formal and official. This is not yet a voted and approved project of the town.
Seemed to me to be pretty pertinent to get their permission to send it there before we go through all these steps.
We've had preliminary conversations. We can get the IMA group together to follow up on that. As you might imagine, one wouldn't necessarily see the connection between wastewater and education, but there are two distinct agreements that are out there that are often talked to in the same vein.
Thank you. I guess lastly, looking at the debt that might be associated, tonight's presentation, very helpful that we've got $70 million worth of projects that the town hasn't seen the tax increase for yet. Where would this land with that $70 million?
This would be added, so the article that you typically have come forward is an authorization to borrow on the one hand, so that's authorized. So that number, 31 million, would be added to the authorization should that article pass. Beyond that, it's also then, and further, that the town sets aside a sum of money to pay upfront the loan costs. As you can see in the documentation, as we've seen Phase 2, they're talking about 2% interest. They also talk, as we saw in Phase 3, 0. But what we're hearing from DEP is they're more likely going with the 2%, but that's still in flux. And then last but not least, because it's a project of this magnitude, the article would also contemplate a separate debt exclusion. So that's what the town's creating. I think to prior speakers, that's not necessarily what the petitioned article gets to, because it doesn't have the same language, so it's not going to have the same effect.
Thank you. I mean, given, we also have to take a look at what this means if we're gonna, it's a tall ask asking the small town of Harwich to borrow $100 million all at once and have it hit their tax bill. So I need to know what that's gonna cost. For what's already on the books, we haven't seen any proposed tax increases or projected tax increases, and then what this will do on top of that. Because borrowing $100 million or doing $100 million worth of projects and taxing accordingly is a tall ask.
No. Julie?
I heard you mentioned a February 14th date. If you're gonna speak, just go to the podium.
That's for turning in the petition.
That's just the petition?
Yeah,
Right.
Okay, that's fine. I thought there was some other, because I didn't see.
February 14th.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you get up.
It's okay.
Okay, I just want clarification on that because I knew that Joe's coming back with the 2/27 date.
Pete?
Joe, through you, Mr. Chair. Joe, do you know how many properties does this impact?
I'm going to say generally in the order of 150, more or less.
What's that?
So I'll just add that to piggyback off of Pete's comments too. I did a little math, and when, to Michael's point about I need to see more information, right? Well, I'm in the middle of so give me 2 minutes and then we'll, I did a little bit of math, and the first two phases resulted in roughly $63,000 per home when you look at the amount of the homes that were sewered for the cost. This is more around the $180,000 per home. My numbers might be a little off, but it's right around triple the cost for this area. So to Michael's point, I'm absolutely going to want to see a lot more information as to how this is going to shake out and how our taxpayers are going to be affected in a pretty short window of time if we borrow this kind of money. So, please.
Thank you. Again, Ann Frechette from Great Sands Lakes. So I just wanted to revise the number that Town Administrator Mr. Powers just threw out. So the Great Sands Lakes Association has 280 members of our association, and not all those members, not all those households will be hooked up to the sewer system, but we are the households that will be affected, because again, the water flows from north to south. So our association does not include people who are north of Queen Anne Road who will be sewered, but there's 280 households to the south of Queen Anne Road who are very interested in making sure that this project moves forward.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? Joe, nothing more?
Well, just to say that I think what we're all looking at is the prospect of two articles on the same warrant, one of which is citizen petition. You have the language in front of you, and then there will be the town's article. I'll leave it to your counsel to tell you the effects of one of the versus the other. But the presence of both in the warrant doesn't change anything other than you, the select board, are gonna have to determine if that project goes forward. And I would imagine you're gonna determine that based on the article that's provided by bond counsel and council. So there is that question of the project going forward, and I think that you've asked a lot of the questions that you're gonna want answers to decide that. But you've been informed tonight that there's a citizen petition article that's coming. Again, we've given great guidance from our town clerk. We do nothing to in any way, shape, or form impede that or talk about that process. But there are going to be two articles about Great Sand Lakes, one of which is the town's article, that is meant to accomplish everything that needs to be done for a construction project of any sort.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. Moving on to new business item B. Discussion on the Monomoy Regional School Agreement. Vote to authorize the chair to request a joint meeting with the Chatham Select Board. So I'll lead on this one. You know, it comes as no surprise that many feel that the current Monomoy Regional School System Agreement is unsustainable financially for the town. Now, coupled with the fact that the Monomoy Regional Middle School repair project has gone from 2.5 million to over 10 and maybe 12 million. I haven't heard the final numbers. But the buzz out there is it's over a $10 million project. Julie, I almost called you Madam Chair. Julie, I'm going to ask, when was that meeting that you had with the, was that June or July?
Yeah, no, I want to say it was more like August.
Okay. So Julie here met with Chatham, I believe with administration as well, were you?
And finance.
And finance and school, okay. And what came out of that is, for me at least, the idea to have more conversation. I know that some of my board members feel the same way. So my ask here tonight is twofold. First off, I believe we're a little late to even begin to discuss the agreement as it sits as a whole. So I don't feel that would be a productive use of time right now. I don't even know if we started that back in August, if that would have been doable by an annual town meeting in May. But what I do think may have some merit is if this board felt comfortable enough to have me reach out to have a meeting with, not a joint meeting, I've given that some thought, but I'd like to have two of our select board members meet with two of their select board members with administration, school, and FinCom, or finance, I'm sorry, finance. And request that we amend the formula to fund that middle school project. That formula stands right now at 76% to the Harwich voters. My feeling is I'd like the support of this board to reach out, have more conversation, present them with a draft of saying this is something that I think could be done, if they would like to have the conversation, and request that we amend the formula to fund that project. So that's my open. I'd like to hear from the board members. My opinion is something needs to be done sooner rather than later, and I'll start with Michael.
Been asking for this for a long time, so however we get there, I think Pete brought up capital, which I think is another tall ask of us to pay 76% of the work that's gonna be needed in the middle school. So I would support that, Jeff. The only caution is 2 members of a board will be a subcommittee, so it'll have to be a posted meeting regardless. I would do full board or just 2 members. As far as an agreement being made this year, the only way I would agree to it is if we agree to get back to the table ASAP, even this year, to start looking at amendments to the agreement, the regional agreement, so that we're not waiting another year, 2 years, 3 years before we address that as well. So, I'd support it. 2, all.
Okay.
Whatever the board decides.
Other board members want to? Don?
Yeah, building off of what Michael said, I mean, I've been feeling this for years too, but I think before we go any further, you have to be able to at least clearly state, this is not a raid on the educational quality that we're looking at. We don't want anything cut down or dumbed down or anything. The problem is there's 2 interrelated percentages. One is the 76 that we front compared to the town of Chatham. The other one is, if you look at this versus what used to be a percentage of the town budget, the school, because the reality is you're graduating roughly the same number of people as Harwich did by itself 20 years ago, somewhere near that number. Except that where you're at right now, the acceleration of the cost of the operation of the school is starting to approach the cost of operating the town itself. And what I'm concerned about, and what Chatham should be concerned about too, is that to the extent that that becomes a tall ask, I mean, we've got 8 contracts that are up right now this year. To the extent that that takes money away from the town's endeavors to operate as a town, there's going to be angst. And I really don't want to see that occurring and getting to the point of continuing overrides. There has to be a more durable way of approaching this, and saner heads have to prevail. It's not something where it's an appropriate answer to say, well, you guys agreed to it, so you're stuck. The reality is we're here. We want to keep the quality of the education as high as possible. And since we're the biggest donor to that, we really need to keep the Harwich taxpayers engaged in this and have them continue to want to have the highest possible education. We're heading in the wrong direction for that. And if it starts creating a problem where we can't operate the town efficiently, there will be overrides, and that's when everybody's going to start pointing fingers. The time to do this is now, and I disagree. We should start doing this now for next year's annual town meeting, because it's never the right time. I've never seen anybody say, yeah, let's go and talk about this now, because it's always too early or too late. If we start right away with the idea that we're not looking for this town meeting, I think we could have more productive discussions. So I'm all in on doing this.
Pete?
I don't want to repeat much what was said, but clearly the emphasis with us is this isn't sustainable. And so what we'd rather do is be proactive and have the conversation with Chatham in a productive environment and try to come to terms that are agreeable to both sides. The agreement is up for review every 5 years. And so I don't think we're being unrealistic to ask for it to happen now. It's scheduled to happen in May of 2027. And there are other ways to amend this document, such as a vote of the school board, a 3/4 vote of the school board to amend the document. We also have the ability to have a petition from this town, 10% of our registered voters, to request an amendment to this agreement. So there's avenues available. We don't want to go down that path. I'd love for the school board to have this discussion as a committee and decide what they'd like to do. But we have options. I have no no problem with either a member of this board or two members of this board meeting with the town of Chatham officials to begin this discussion. And again, it's truly for the best interest of the school, and I guess most importantly, the students who attend the school. So that's where I stand with this.
Thank you, Pete. Julie?
So I have no problem with any kind of conversation that's gonna try to address the problems that we know exist, but I would say that I would like to see first the middle school building renovation committee come up with their report. I would also like to see any kind of discussion on trying to figure out how to amend any agreement, whether it be just for capital items or a larger scale renovation. Start at the school committee level and then come to this board. So, again, I'm not against any kind of conversations happening, but I'd like to see a process and have it be followed before then we just jump in, because we're also in the middle of a couple of busy months leading up to a very busy spring. So that'd be my idea of how to move forward, is to get that middle school renovation committee's information, what numbers are we talking about, then talk about the school committee having the larger discussion, whether it be, like I said, capital and the overall agreement, and then have a couple board members or a joint meeting.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, one other thing I just want to point out is,
Sure.
for the agenda, just so that we don't have any issue, is that we don't currently, if we're talking about the overall regional school agreement, or are we talking about the capital projects? Because we're not talking, it's not defined in terms of capital on here.
The overall agreement encompasses how renovations are going to be handled as
Right,
well.
so I just thought you were saying that you wanted to have that conversation first, the capital.
I'm looking at having a conversation that is the best use of time and the most efficient use of time. So there's a lot of moving parts. We don't have the answers to the air quality test. We don't know the health of that building. What we do know is the health of that, what we do know is that we do know the health of the building is the building is not in good shape. We don't know whether or not the indoor air quality is causing our kids and our teachers to be sick. I want to see that data before anything moves here, because that frankly would change the way I think about this.
Right.
I'll also add, though, that there's going to be two requests of this select board shortly. One is going to be the agreement, the budget for the school, and the second is going to be to fund this capital plan, or this capital request. So the lower hanging fruit for me would be to have a discussion regarding an amendment of the capital request and how it's funded. So
Right.
that's,
And that's the only thing I'm saying, is we didn't, so it's fine, as long as it's generic enough, I just want to point that out. That
okay,
we didn't break it out
Yep.
into capital versus,
understood. Martha?
Martha Donovan, East Harwich. I'm the chair of the Capital Outlay Committee, but today I'm here as a taxpayer, and I've expressed some of my views to Pete about the school, and Dr. Carpenter, you're not going to like what I say. But there are two levers that we have here. We have the capital and we have the operating budget, and we need to be pulling on both of those right now, because the school budget is just the budget and the capital are just sort of out of control. I agree with Charles, and I'm sorry, I don't remember Charles's last name.
Liska.
I don't think we should move forward with the capital plan if we can't get some kind of relief. My concern is, and according to, if I read last year's presentation of the school budget, we're losing students and the demographics are changing. It's more in Chatham than it is here in Harwich. And so to me, the risk assessment is, we fix the school, and then they say, we're going to take our marbles and go home. And I don't know if they can do that in the agreement, because I've not read the agreement. But they say, we've got a nice new middle school, and we want to have our own middle school. We don't need you anymore, Harwich. So I think we need to be very careful about putting money into this capital at 76%, and next year it's going to be 77, and the year after it's going to be 78, or it's just creeping up on Harwich versus Chatham. And so I think we need to have a hard line here and hold the line. It's not that we won't fix the school, but we're not going to do it under this arrangement. And I think we need to state that clearly. And so I'm glad you guys are having this conversation. But I think taxpayers need to step up and be heard. It's getting to be too much. And we're talking about 70, and you know how, and I appreciate the debt discussion here tonight. I know that bored a lot of people. I have been asking them for that for 4 years, begging to talk about debt, right? Because there is that unfunded debt piece. And now we're talking about another 30-odd million for 3A, phase 3A of the wastewater. At what point as taxpayers do we say, it's enough? I know that Joe feels the town is in good shape financially, but I don't think taxpayers feel that way today. So I hope all of you hear that, and I know you want to do something about it, but we really need to put our feet down and get a better deal and say no more, because it just is getting to be too much, in my opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Anything else from the board? So is the consensus of the board for me to reach out to Chatham and request a meeting to begin conversation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, a conversation, yeah, I have my reasons why I methodically want to see certain things be delivered in terms of information. And of course, the discussion, to me, is a large discussion. I just don't know that, to me, that it's imperative leading up to town meeting, but certainly reach out.
Do we
Okay.
wanna, do we wanna do it, sorry, do we wanna do it two-person or whole board? Your suggestion is two-person. I'm okay with starting the conversation with two.
Well, Don, 2? Okay. Yeah, and then it depends on how it lands when I present it on that side as well.
Is the board comfortable? I think the chair, personally think the chair should be involved in said conversation, and that I would leave it up to the chair to pick another member besides me.
So if we get to that point, thank you, I'd be happy to pick.
Can we ask Scott when the building renovation is supposed to have numbers too?
Sure. Mr. Carpenter, would you mind coming up to answer 2, maybe 3 quick questions, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Thank you.
You can say no.
Hey, got to stretch my legs.
I'll let you ask.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. I just wanted to know if you have a timeline on the committee and when they expect to have sort of all of their information together.
Hopefully, you know, I think we're trying to get things together to at least be able to get ready for any sort of warrant article for the Springtown meeting, annual town meeting. And we also recognize that it's a really tight timeline for us to do that and make sure that we're bringing forward good, accurate information. So we've got a lot of different testing that's going on to make sure that we understand, both air quality as Jeff mentioned, but also, to do bores, through the drywall to, throughout the building to get a much better understanding what the status is of the cavity within the wall.
So you think in a month or?
It's one of the
Oh,
two
yeah, you're on
co-chairs
that,
as well.
got that, yeah.
But I'm guessing it's going to be the next month and a half. We'll come up with much tighter numbers.
Okay. That's helpful. I'm just looking to gauge time, so thank you. That's all I have.
I think there's some complexities to the whole project, just in terms of, if the project gets big enough, there are different things that get triggered, so there's, do you have to bring things up to 88, levels this, currently, and then there's also, if there's enough of a siding of a building that gets done, does it trigger new codes
Energy
that have
code,
been out there that would cause the width of walls to need to get bumped out with insulation to, so there's a lot of interpretation that's going on to make sure that, that we come back with an accurate answer that satisfies ultimately a building inspector in Chatham and also, all the other state regs.
Thank you.
So one from me. Part of this, for me, is timeline, and I'm just going to confirm with you. Did I hear that if all goes well, that the project would begin around or about June 1st of 2026?
I think even that.
2025, I'm sorry.
I think even that would be a extremely ambitious timeline.
Okay.
I don't think it's realistic if all the ducks were in order that, and if it were to pass town meeting in both towns, that contractors would be rolling up July 1. I just think we're at a point that, that could construction start sometime in the late summer, fall? Yes, if everything else were to take place. And clearly, there's a lot of conversations that folks want to have between now and then, too.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From my perspective, I just want to be clear. This isn't a project-dependent discussion. It has to do with the deal, the whole deal. I am not interested in having a conversation through the press to another town. Neither am I interested in one or two people approaching the Chatham board saying, would you like to have a discussion? Because we need to have a discussion. So I'd like to keep it low-key on the two persons, but it's not just about that, because that's the flavor of the day. There's always going to be something that needs to happen. The question is, within the large scope of this agreement, is this a fair and equitable way of operating, and is it sustainable in a way that you can count on getting support from both towns? That's a discussion that has to happen before it becomes, five-alarm fire.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else? I view this as a mutual problem, mutual between the two towns. That's exactly what this is to me. And if we both go into these discussions feeling that this is a mutual problem for both towns to make sure that our kids have the educational value and the component that they're used to, and our teachers are paid fairly. There's so many variables that fall into this equation for me that we need to have more conversation. I mean, it's not going to happen unless people begin to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I move that we approve a disclosure by special municipal employee of financial interest in a municipal contract as required by General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 20D, for Brendan J. Lowney as presented.
And as requested by him.
And as requested by him.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
And further to
Please.
authorize the chair to sign.
Further to authorize the chair to sign.
That was my second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
Yeah.
Would you like to say something, Brendan, or do you want to leave now?
I was here to, no, I'll keep my mouth shut, but thank you.
Yeah, you couldn't see me going like, no, tell Bob.
I had 5 pages of prepared remarks.
Done, so, I'm good, thank you.
Are you good? Okay.
Yes.
You got the win.
Excellent, thank you. Now we move to old business, item A. Review of draft housing production plan, so I'll start with this one as well. Get to my page here. What I'm handing, just so the public understands, what I'm handing to the board will help facilitate, hopefully, this discussion. It's already in your packet, page 320 to 325. Not that I've checked before I sat down here, but this will allow everyone to follow along much easier. Back in January, I believe, late January, Select Board Member McCaskill put forward a suggestion. That suggestion was received by this Select Board and everybody was, I believe, in favor of that suggestion. The suggestion was that the LCP, Local Planning Committee, has done a fantastic job, but at this point, instead of each board member sending their edits, their additions, their deletions, their omissions, or whatever, to the chair of the Local Planning Committee, it would be better time utilized if we brought all of our edits here. And then we could discuss it here at the board level, present it to Christine Flynn, our town planner, to then create another draft. That's what I took away from that meeting in January. Since then, well, what I'll do is I will have each board member tell us where we sit right now, where they sit, specific to this housing production plan. Julia, do you want to speak to where?
Yeah, so I was good with the original draft, and the only other thing I'll say is I was gonna mention this about our minutes that we approved earlier. I was indicating where there was some comments made previously, and the consultant came back explaining that certain numbers couldn't be revised because they flow with the federal numbers, which is what they need to do. So I don't have any issue with any board members, suggested edits, revisions, whatever. I personally don't have any specific.
Okay. Don?
Well, I didn't feel compelled to put it in writing because I've done this 3 times in public meetings, including at the joint meeting. But some of this has been captured. The road infrastructure certainly hasn't. And that really needs to be discussed because we have, after that meeting, had a report from our traffic consultant that there are a lot of roads that are failing, number one. Number two, I would have loved to see some comment about scattered site housing in smaller numbers because I had been talking about that. Infill housing is articulated in page 314 of our packet. Yeah, that's 314. Is not the same. And finally, I do want to say that it talks to the fact that all regulatory boards have been addressed and talked to. That is simply not true. I mean, there may be an intention to do that, and frankly, I think a lot of what I'm saying can be fixed with time, but at this point in time, these things have not happened. It is not the same as going to the health director as going to the Board of Health. And I believe I said at that meeting, to go to a meeting, a posted meeting, and have a discussion with the whole committee. I know I said that. So absent this, at this point, I'm not willing to advance this plan. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but there's also, quite frankly, and I think Michael had alluded to this in some of his comments, to grab onto something. The state has increasingly rigged the game so that the money that's available, as a practical matter, really has to be captured in projects that are 80, 100, 120 units, and that's so out of character for this town. We had never used to build that quantity of housing. The housing that we did, whether it's Driftwood Place or Murray Way, with Hetch housing on Sisson Road, integrated into the community. There was a sense of community in that. To start building large-scale apartment complexes is anathema, and while they don't explicitly state that that's their momentum, they won't lend you money for anything less than that. And that's really distressing. I'm not sure how we can articulate that in a plan, but I'd sure as heck want to be able to say that our vision of doing this effectively is having all members of the community integrated with each other, and that everybody lives in housing that's part of that community. It's not like a prefab 80 or 100 unit new community that they were inserting. Our roadways cannot handle that. It gives an awful lot of insight into water, very little on the roadways.
Thank you.
I prefer to Selectman McCaskill, you put this summary together for us.
He's going to go over all of these. You want to, okay.
I'd love to hear it.
I'm not gonna go over all of them.
Okay.
You asked for a homework assignment, I did it, and I sent you that as my notes, and to my few critics on social media today for not spell checking it or wordsmithing it to their liking. Sorry, but I did half of it on my telephone. I think, I laid it out, I read this document 5 times, minimum. And I laid it out page by page and comment by comment. Some of them are suggestions, some of them are corrections. And I think it, Jeff, you can read them all if you want, but I think it
No.
speaks for itself. It was in the public packet, so the public can do it, but solving for 10% is not an option at the way the state wants to go. Just building projects to get to that 10% shouldn't be an option for this town. And as we saw in the most recent Pine Oaks 4 project, every single department head weighed in on the cost that was gonna be associated to their department by building this. Every single one of them. And if you were here earlier through the budget presentation, and last week when we talked about only being within $140,000 of the levy limit, we really need to pay attention. And creating, in my opinion, as written, creating a new emergency by trying to solve one that was done by poor planning is nothing that I'm gonna sign my name to or support in any way, shape, or form. Yes, we need housing, but we're building housing. And I guess question through you, Mr. Chair, to the town administrator, a couple of my comments in here are related to the shy list. It's interesting that we went from in the 6s into the 4s, yet nobody went to the assessing department and said they wanted to pay full taxes now. So how do we go down 2.5% on the shy list? So I would have to assume that they're being honest and they're still renting them affordably. And if they're not, what's the mechanism to get to renegotiating? Because if you add back that 2.5% that those folks aren't paying taxes on, and you add the new projects that we're doing, we're all of a sudden in the 7s. And 7s is progress. And if you look at everybody else's shy list on Cape Cod, we're not behind many at the 6%. And we're making progress in ways that are actually benefiting Harwich without just creating infrastructure nightmares, in my opinion. And again, to just pass this and with the statements that are in here regarding larger developments, I'm just not there. So I'll answer any questions anyone has. I'll defend my statements. But for me, it's not about getting to 10%, just to get to 10%. And I would implore everybody to look at what the actual costs are to you, the taxpayers, by putting in these larger developments and not taking our time and building thoughtful housing. And to the earlier petitioner about tree clearing, has anyone looked at what a large-scale project's actually gonna do for tree clearing? Talking about many, 12-plus acres of asphalt. Again, no thought at all, other than to appease the state and to try and solve a problem that was created by poor planning. 20% of these projects get to go to our local preference that have to be affordable. So that means on a 250-unit project, you're only getting 200. Now, we can say that the proposed developers are friends and neighbors. If they were friends and neighbors, they'd look at our infrastructure costs, because they're there. So, as I said, without some of these changes, and I'm willing to work with the planner if the board supports them, I'm a no. I'm a no now, and I'm a no forever, and I will advocate against this plan until the end of time. Now, with that said, because I didn't say it, Jeff said it, the local comprehensive planning committee did an outstanding job. There's a ton of information in there. But this should read and at least hold hands with our local comprehensive plan. And if you read the local comprehensive plan side by side with this, there are so many contradictions in what we want as a town in the LCP that are not incorporated into the housing production plan. And one of the speakers a few weeks ago said it's a beautiful plan and it's a blueprint to move forward. I don't think it was read by that person, because if you read it, there's facts and figures in there are wrong, tax rate's wrong, that can be updated, that's a simple one. But that shy list, we're not in the 4s. And if we are in the 4s, where is our tax dollars for the 2.3 or 2.4% that went down? And who's monitoring that?
Pete?
I appreciate the comments from Selectman McCaskill. It's after 9 o'clock, so I refuse to elevate my blood pressure to talk about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So all I'll say is that I think you began this, Mr. Chair, by saying that we could agree to send the changes to the planner, town planner, get her input and thoughts on it, and then bring it back to us as a committee, and I would support that.
Well, thank you. That is actually the exercise. So we have these edits, but before I give these edits to our town planner, I would like to hear any objections to any of these edits. Joe has an objection?
I have an objection to process.
Okay, that's, sure.
I'm your town administrator, the director of planning and community development works for me and through me. I would love for that to come to me, for me to work with staff.
That's exactly what I meant.
Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
So before,
Those are not the only comments, as I said.
well, no, so let me get to that point in a second here. So I will ask now the board if there are any objections to moving this forward through our town administrator to work with his direct reports, because it would be, again, in my opinion, an incredible waste of time to give this to the town planner, through Joe, of course, and have it come back to us, but then not be happy with the edits Select Board Member McCaskill has made. That, I think, would be an injustice to people's effort and time. So, hello, Mr. Waystack.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Powers, Richard Waystack, Harwich. I've sat at meetings, I've heard the chair, the LCP, say, please write down your comments and submit them. Mr. McCaskill, you wrote down your comments. You submitted. But Mr. Howell, you mentioned that they've missed a few things. Have you written them down? Have you given them
There
to
were
them?
3 sets of minutes, Richard.
See, that's the point. You've got a request from committee chairs to write down, as Mr. McCaskill did. Same thing, Mr. Bakarsky. If you have changes, you've got a chair, you've got a committee that are working their butts off, so they don't go through the minutes, Don. They've asked members of the board to take the time, as one member did, to present it so they can move forward. We keep spinning around and around, meeting after meeting after meeting. Nothing gets done. Please put your comments down, submit them to the town planner and to the chair.
Excuse me, Richard, I'll just say, don't submit them to the town planner, submit them to me. And then I'll bring them back at our next meeting, and I will have a discussion as to if your changes and Pete's changes and omissions sit well with the rest of the board. That's the only way I can see this working. Don?
Without specifically addressing Mr. Waystack's comments, Mr. McCaskill actually took the time to watch the joint meeting. And I know I specifically said in front of their faces, Richard, what it was that I was concerned about. It was in a meeting in real time. So to say that I haven't taken the time to put down, as a matter of fact, I took the time to go to the meeting, the entire board didn't. And I said what I said, and one of these things has nothing to do with the language. It has to do with the process, being able to make sure that everybody that should be part of the process is part of the process. And I don't mean just selling them on it. I mean receiving information that may indicate that they'd like something changed or not something changed. The process itself consumes some time, and there is no substitute for time other than more time. So you can feel whatever way you want to. I know that for 25 years I've been involved in building affordable housing, so it's not like I'm trying to be an obstructionist about this, but it just, the tone of what we're trying to build has dramatically changed in this plan. It's not what we had originally been doing over the last 20 years. It's more massive in scope in terms of a particular project here or a particular project there. And I think that's what Mr. McCaskill was trying to point out in one of the projects right now. These are really big projects that are going to create really big changes in wherever they're placed. So that's a fact. I can't put it any more simply than that. It's anathema to what we had been doing.
Hi, Margot.
Hi, Margot Fenn.
Thank you.
I just wanted to address a couple of factual things. After our joint meeting with you, we did go back and get in touch with some of the regulatory boards, including the Board of Health. And I was scheduled, Christina and I were scheduled to go meet with them the week that all the meetings got canceled because of the problem with the town website. We did meet last week with the Conservation Commission again. Joyce has been in close communication with the wastewater board, and they have given us written comments, which were incorporated in the most recent draft. I am scheduled to go back on the 20th of this month to talk to the Board of Health. So we are following through on your suggestions. It's just sometimes things get messed up by unexpected events. So, I guess as long as I've got the podium for 1 second, I would just say that I can understand all of the concerns that this board has raised, and I'm really glad that Michael put his comments in writing, and we are really interested in seeing those comments. I just want to remind everybody that whether we like the state or not, these are the rules that we play under. And in order for this town to be able to access the money that we need to address this problem, we need this plan. So let's try to get all the corrections and changes made and get the plan approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce McIntyre. As you know, I'm the chair of the local planning committee, put together this housing production plan, and appreciate the feedback, all of it. And I would just, in response to some of the comments, kind of remind the public and the board, the housing production plan is given to us sort of by style to be approved by the state and then the commission. I have learned, I'm a layperson, both from our planner and from our professional staff, there's a certain format, right, that we have to meet. It is largely demographic, so the housing production plan is largely a collection of information. There is, as I go through and read it, I would take issue a little bit with the thought or that the plan is in support of large-scale development. As we go forward revising this, perhaps we're going to have to get down to line by line what is being interpreted as that, because that is certainly not what the committee's deliberations have been, and that's not been the intention of the plan. So I, for the record, want to sort of say that it's not what the committee's been working on, or nor have we, tacitly supported that, and a lot of us are saying the same thing, so it's frustrating as we spin back and forth, because we're 2.5 years into this, close to 3 years, $240,000 of the hardworking taxpayers' money. So I do take, issue a little bit with that, of that there is no support, either intended or explicit in the HPP for, high density, high volume development. And yet the numbers support the need for, the real gaps we have in both affordable and attainable. We all know, working on those differences for working families and, pillars of our community to stay here in town. That said, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the HPP is intended by this convention that has been given to us, to be approved by the Cape Cod Commission and, the state, is that the really Harwich specific stuff is in the comprehensive plan, and that is where it's in 175 pages of detail. A lot of what we're saying is the same thing in terms of, the local challenges to address that. So just want to say that again for everyone that's watching from home and how it gets to the newspaper. The HPP is largely data-driven, and the Harwich-specific stuff is in the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the board?
Mr. Chair, I'll just state that,
Yeah, please.
as I told you previously, I do not plan on submitting any edits for you to submit to other folks. When and if the final, or when the final plan is put before us, I will vote up or down at that time.
Excellent, thank you. And to that end, I think, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course.
I just had a follow-up because as these get incorporated, the revisions, it would be helpful, and, but I'm not trying to make it more difficult. It would be helpful if, after you send everything to Joe and Joe sends it to Christine, whatever way we go forward, it would be helpful to see what was there and then what's proposed, rather than just deleting and highlighting the changes. Because, you know, for instance, I just have a question on one of Michael's things, and I understand where he's coming from with it, but at the same token, to me, it's generic enough, and I just want to see how it's interpreted in terms of change.
Yes. We're the best tech, and I've talked about this, the best technology we have right now about this is kind of a bummer, because it's like, you know, Microsoft Word with track changes on. There are lots of other technologies available in terms of working on a document of this density, this complexity, this many people. That's not available to us as a town, so we are held back by that. But yes, agreed with the track
If
changes
we
on.
could just do like strike through or something.
Yeah,
I
right,
know.
and it's
I'm
hard.
not
Yeah, it
pretending.
depends on how you're reading it, literally
Yeah.
down to, you're reading on an iPad and stuff like that. The other, you know, in the feedback that would be helpful, I think, is around the 10%, and we'll get into that, you know, about this, some of the specific objections, you know, I don't look at that document that's in support of, that says, you know, Harwich needs to do 10%. And again, that's been a lot of our deliberation has been, yeah, that is hard, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, as long as we could have something that would be helpful.
So to that end, I will get Joe Michael's edits. I'll sit with you maybe for a little bit and go over them, and then you can push them along to your direct reports, and then we can get a version 637 back on one of our meetings that's upcoming and in the near future. I just, you know, it was said that the local planning committee has done a lot of work. There's also been a ton of residents of our town who've come out, and they've gone to your community engagements. I just want to make sure that this board isn't the impediment to progress of getting this over the finish line. So let's make a good effort and put this forward and see what we can do. And then to the next point on old business B is a discussion on the local comprehensive plan for the May 2025 annual town meeting. My feeling is I'd like to get the board's understand, or the board's input on whether or not you think we're going to make it. Does anybody want to open? I'm interested to know at the pace we're going if that document will make the annual town meeting.
I personally would like to see it make annual town meeting. If we can get the revisions circulated, and, I mean, it's only, what is it, February 10th?
Well, I would need to, I think, do the exact same thing,
Right.
is ask for revisions and omissions and changes to come here, and then we can talk about it at the board level, and then, again, move it through town administration to the direct reports to modify. So that's what would have to happen for that, unless there's another way that I don't know.
No, I think you're right.
Don?
No, that would be a good process. I'm more interested in seeing it pass town meeting than I am seeing it get to town meeting.
And that's part of my question, is I
And
want to put it there to have it.
And I don't think that it's ready for this town meeting. I really don't. I'd love to be able to see support, but there's a whole bunch of things that citation needed, table needs to be inserted. We're at the point now where the public should be looking at a finished document. Again, I'm going to bring up everybody's board should have been talked to, because I know I had 3 different committees that weren't necessarily regulatory that felt that they had something to offer this, and they were kind of waiting for somebody to contact them. I could easily get that information, but time is a valuable commodity, and I've never seen anything relative. This is specific to Harwich, and I said it at the joint meeting. I'm going to repeat it again. This could either be a help as a roadmap, or it could be used as a bludgeon. In Dennis, they damn near got a big box Lowe's store out of it, because in their plan, it talked about more robust development in their industrial park. the comprehensive plan itself means something. It says something to the commission about developments of regional impact, where they refer to the plan to see what the townspeople want. It has to be done right. And you have to get buy-in, not just from the public, but from the bodies. I said it back in that meeting, I'll repeat it again. Many of these bodies are administering public mass general laws that get them more involved with what can and what can't be done legally. And you really want to buy-in from everybody going into town meeting. I have never seen a regulatory bylaw of any sort, whether it's the planning board, submitting something that passed when there is any kind of contention going on at the front table. And I'm really trying to see this get passed, but I don't see in its current form that this town meeting is the place to do it. Maybe in a special town meeting in the fall, but there's not enough time to have this fully discussed, because there's a lot of other stuff that's going on, that's going to be going on at that town meeting. And I'm not sure that we want to just gamble, because I'm telling you, just knowing from my own experience, there's still discussion going on in Brewster with the sea camps, in Millstone, in Chatham with the airport. Things that fail, that are brought back, have a higher hill to climb. It'd be better if you could coalesce all the support so that there is nearly unanimous support going into that from the town leaders, or there's going to be a problem. And you can shoot the messenger, but that's how I feel about this, because I've been through three of these, including this right now. It's really important. It's not just the citizens buy-in, it's the governance buy-in. You just asked for an opinion.
I did. Michael?
I had a lot fewer comments on the local comprehensive plan, and I thought some of them were very basic. So I would hope that we could get it to town meeting this year, and I would hope that the board does everything that they can do to get it there. Articulate your changes, but I thought they did a great job. The document is solid. So, and like I said, my edits I thought were very basic on this particular one. So I think we have plenty of time to educate people, and I think that the committee will educate people. I think we can educate people here, so I hope we can move it forward.
Dare I? Okay. Okay, Ed, please.
This is 9 o'clock rule.
Yeah, I know. Right. Moving it along.
Just briefly, as Margot said, she'll be attending the Board of Health meeting, and I'll be going with her. I'm also going to be meeting with the Energy and what's it called?
Climate Energy.
Climate Committee. I've actually been in contact with Val and some of the climate activists in town, encouraging them to be part of the process. And I've sent them where we are now, the drafts, so they can review them before so they're ready to make comments for the program, the plan, when we meet. Mr. Howell, if you have 3 other committees other than those that want to be contacted, I am more than happy to do that, but I need to know who they are.
Oh, you hit 2 of them already.
Okay, who's the 3rd?
We'll talk offline.
Okay. Anyway, but this is closing in on 3 years' work of the committee, and if we push it off another year, that'll be 4 years, which is longer than a select board's term, and I'm not sure some of our members really signed up for doing that, and so we have committed to put in the work, and if it takes extra meetings and attending meetings of other committees in the time we have until town meeting to explain it and publicize it and educate people, we've committed ourselves to doing that. So
thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
I'll just close by saying, if the select board is the sole arbiter of these 2 plans, then we've got to we've got to help them along. We've got to help them along, we've got to give them the information they need, give me the information, I will forward it, and we will get this over the finish line, but we can't guess, and they shouldn't have to either. So, on to, exciting, fun topic, Select Board reorganization. So Don, you asked for it to be on, so I'll put it in your hands.
Oh, I just wanted it on so that if anybody wanted to discuss it, I don't care to discuss it.
Anybody
myself.
have any discussion on Select Board reorganization?
You know, I'm gonna put a motion on the table to start conversation. And I originally said I'd like to see some debate on this. Select Board Member Handler, last week you said that you wanted to do it and that you were interested in doing it and for the reasons why. I think you've done a great job with the dog hearing that you had to put yourself through in the last few meetings. So to get something on the table so that we can show a little bit of leadership in town, I'm going to nominate you as chair.
I will second it.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I would just say with that, if any other board member wants to be chair, now's the time to explain why.
Hence the discussion. So moved and seconded. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Jumped the gun there.
Well, that's all right. As I said to Michael directly on the phone, I explained to him that I would, and that it was basically for 3 or 4 months. That I wanted to be able to carry us through during a cycle that you've only been through once. One thing I do want to mention here, and it can be for this, for a discussion in June, we are taking something that used to be rotated around, routinely rotated around, and we're changing it into something that's a job interview. And I disagree with that process entirely. It should be spread around normally, just as a regular course of business. So with that, you've got the motion, you've got the second.
I'm just going to ask what you mean by that. I don't understand where you're going, and I'm
All
not afraid to
capable
ask
members of the
question.
board, well, don't be afraid. All members of the board through the years have wound, it's capable, unless somebody's going to make the comment that somebody in this sitting right here isn't capable. Normally, it rotates around. You know, like 1 year you, 1 year the person next to you, 1 year. It's not something that was ever contemplated to be like a routinely held by 1 or 2 people and just move on that way. So it's not about you specifically, it's about the process in general. It has not worked that way in the last 7 years.
Understood. I thought you were talking about my 2 meetings that I've chaired.
Nope. Well, actually, you've done a very good job.
Thank you. The same song's been playing on the radio since I became chair. It's still going. So we have a motion and a second. Pete, did you want, I thought you might have had your hand up?
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Sure.
Jeff, and I know you and I have talked about this briefly, and so I don't think I'm really putting you on the spot, and if I am, feel free to tell me I am.
Not at all.
But, and I agree it's not a job interview, but at the same time, I'd kind of like to know your thoughts on how the role and responsibility of the chair.
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, the role and responsibility for me would be to keep all 4 of you informed. I'm the first among equals. I have no greater power than any of you. As we saw tonight with the last discussion on the local planning committee, it's to organize, it's to do extra work, it's to try to draw this team together to do what it takes to take care of the town of Harwich. Communication, I think, is my strong point. I think all of you have found that out over the last 2 weeks. As long as I get communication in the opposite direction back to me, I can do anything this board needs and wants.
Along the lines of communication, I'll bring it up now because it's been an issue that I've had with this current configuration, not the people involved, but different than what I experienced before, which is the communication flow with the town administrator essentially going through the chair, and the chair going through the town administrator, the board going through the chair to the town administrator. Is that a communication flow that you agree with?
I don't know if it's for me to agree or disagree with. Town administration will give me all necessary and pertinent information. My role is to disseminate it to the board. If that's the way that the current town administrator feels is optimal for him, then that would be his choice. Do I feel it's optimal for me? I get information firsthand. I get it right away. I think you'd have to ask the TA why he thinks that that's the best course of information flow.
Well, I could, but I think it's more so, it's what the board decides as far as information flow, to be honest with you. And so you're right, you get information firsthand.
Right.
And I don't know that that's the best model that we should continue to use going forward.
Well, if the board feels it's not, then the board can let me know, and then
Well,
I
that's why
can
I'm
have a
having this
conversation.
conversation, right.
Well, it's really the first time,
100%.
yeah, so
100%.
I'd be happy to have that conversation with the town administrator if the board feels that that's not I'm backing up only so you guys can see over me, but I'd be happy as the chair to have that conversation. And that's what I feel the chair should do anyway, is take the information from the board members and have the conversations and make us the most efficient we possibly can be, which I don't think we are at this point.
That I would agree with.
Anything else? So I feel like I'm running, I feel like I'm running for select board again. Anything else? Anyway, so we have motion and a second.
Yeah.
Is this a roll call vote, Joe? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
5-0. I'm sorry, I'm just checking.
Abstain.
Oh, you abstain. So we have a 4-1 with one abstention, Mr. Howell.
4-0.
I'm sorry, 4-0-1.
If I could go further?
Absolutely, that was fun. Keep going.
Don, would you have any interest in being vice chair?
I'd rather be in the interview committee.
Okay. Pete, do you have any interest in being vice chair?
What's the pay?
I could give you a portion of my
It's a big
paycheck, but
bonus.
it's not a lot. Well, I would put Pete on the spot and nominate him as vice chair.
Beautiful. Next.
Doesn't want-
You gotta get a second to have the conversation.
We move on.
I wish I could second my own motion.
How about yourself? Do you have any interest?
Somebody else, I could do vice chair.
Motion to make Mr. McCaskill vice chair.
Am I able to second as a chair?
Yes.
Second. Moved and seconded, any discussion? I'll discuss. I'd have been happy with any of the three of you, to be quite honest with you. I think I work fine with all three of you. I would have been happy to have,
I guess you're ignoring me, that's okay.
no one moved you. Here we are. It was moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And an abstention? No.
Opposed.
Opposed. So we have a 4-1, Mr. Howell opposed.
I'd like to nominate Julie Kavanaugh for the interview committee.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? I'm sorry, I just can't hear. So we have a 5-0, Joe.
Oh, do you not want, what?
No, you and I.
Do not want me on it. Is that what you said?
No.
Okay.
I said, never mind.
So we are now reconstituted?
It's like lemon juice.
Oh, we need a clerk.
Pete's the clerk.
I'd like
Yeah.
to nominate Pete Pekarski
He's
as
the
clerk.
clerk, he already is the clerk.
He is the clerk.
I know, but in spirit of reorganization, I think we have
Second.
to.
Any
Elected-
discussion?
Elected, I will not serve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed.
Not even gonna do it. 5-0, Joe. Okay, town administrator, mercifully.
Recorded that as a 4-1.
Please.
Okay, town administrator's report.
Well, given the hour, just a reminder, your meeting is on Tuesday, the
Not Monday.
18th of February. Happy long weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Select board members report, Pete.
We have 12 or 13 items.
Excellent.
Excellent.
You get my Sharpie out. Don?
Nothing.
Julie?
Nothing.
Michael?
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.